Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Intel Extreme Masters, the 10th season. And where are we? Of course, in Gamescom, at Gamescom in Cologne, Germany. And we're already on the final day. Final day of the Intel Extreme Masters here. We've gone through 4 days of StarCraft 2 already. And now only 4 players remain. If you've been watching all week, you know who those players are, but of course, the top of the top remaining here for the Intel Extreme Masters. There's a lot on the line, ladies and gentlemen. There's the prize money, there's the WCS points, there is, of course, the seeding into the World Championship at Katowice, but most of all, you get to have the pride of being the Intel Extreme Masters Gamescom champion. Are you guys all ready for the semifinals and, of course, the finals here at the Intel Extreme Masters? Are you guys at home ready to watch some awesome StarCraft 2? The 4 players remaining for you, they're going to be Sue, Fantasy, MMA, and Innovation battling through. Will we have a perfect sweep from Sue? Will we see some other players finally getting that first place win they've been hungry for all year long, or maybe even all career long here in StarCraft 2? Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to kick off the final day to find out who we will crown as the champion of the Intel Extreme Masters at Gamescom.
Thank you very much, Chobra. Wonderful to have you back in StarCraft 2. Welcome to the analysis desk. I'm joined by none other than Johan, Todd Merlo, and of course, Andy, over Andrew, Moonglade Penner. How are you doing, boys? Good to have you on the desk here at Gamescom.
It's great to be here. We've had a pretty long trip to the final day, but it's been a very exciting one. All the players here today are certainly, deserve to be here.
Yeah, I mean, we started with a lot of players in the open bracket on Wednesday, group stages on Thursday, Friday, of course, the quarterfinals yesterday, but we've landed with 4 absolutely wonderful players, Todd.
Yeah, it seems like the games keep on getting better and better, and I feel like we're really lucky, as in the fans' favorite. They're really delivering here this tournament. You look at this top 4 and you're like, oh my god, like, all these guys are actually insane. Everybody wants to see them do well, and whoever we have in finals here, I feel is going to be a big finals. And I mean, what else can we ask for?
What else can you ask for? I mean, you guys can take a look at the bracket back at home. We started with 8 players in the quarterfinals yesterday, and oh boy, did we get the right players that came through to the semifinals. It just went the way that everyone wanted it to go. We have Sue versus Fantasy in the first semifinals, an absolutely peach of a first semifinals. And then the second one, MMA versus Innovation. Of course, 2 old teammates, 2 friends, go head-to-head in what promises to be an exciting and an electric Terran versus Terran there, Moonblade.
We've seen a lot of trouble from even the top players coming into this, Innovation and Sue, especially Innovation, really being tested so far this tournament. So it's exciting to see how he's going to do it once again. And even taking a step back and looking at the groups, like all the players that have made it into the round of 8 and now into the round of 4, they all deserve to be there and they all make sense. Like, we looked at it and we're like, this should happen. This is the way an ideal bracket should happen.
Yeah, I mean, from the very get-go, when we opened up on Wednesday looking at the open brackets and obviously looking at the groups that were to come, we said from the very beginning, very similar to when we were in Shenzhen for our first Intel Extreme Masters tournament, these players stand out. These are the ones we're expecting to go to the finals. It happened in Shenzhen, and it's happening here at Gamescom too. Sue and Innovation were the 2 players from SK Telecom that traveled here to play in the tournament and were destined to meet in the finals. And right now, that's the way it's going, unless something special happens today from Fantasy or MMA. Isn't that the way we're looking at it, Todd?
Yeah, I think so. I think pretty much everybody agrees on that now. We definitely shouldn't count on anybody, though, because there's been a few upsets, like not any major ones, but we almost saw 4GG. Like, actually, you really brought it to Innovation yesterday, so who knows, maybe MMA can do a little bit better. And yeah, just so excited for these matches, man. Yeah,
I mean, as much as Sue is an outstanding favorite, he's pointed out that Fantasy could be a major weakness for him. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And of course, MMA, he always has a spark of brilliance. A former Intel Extreme Masters champion going up against Innovation. It's going to be a great game. For you guys at home, if you've missed some of the StarCraft 2 action that we've had so far over the last 4 days, which I'm sure some of you have already, make sure to check plays.tv for all the games that you've missed so far, highlights, and also the first-person VODs of every single match that we've uploaded. Absolutely fantastic footage over there. Check it out, plays.tv. And of course, make sure to join us on all the usual social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, you know it, you name it. hashtag IEM, and also facebook.com/IEM. Don't sit at home by yourself. Get on Twitter, get on Facebook, give us a message, and of course, we'll be reading them throughout the show. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I want to know a lot more about Su versus Fantasy, but before we get into that, let's bring them out onto the stage. Chobra! Where are you?
Yes.
I think he's ready. Is he ready? Okay, Chobra, we'll come to you in a quick second here. Looking forward to this one. Before we talk about that, do you think Chobra's ready like the players are?
I'm kind of questioning this right now. I don't know. I hope he is.
He's not.
These players are certainly ready. We've been seeing them practice all morning, but Chobra, on the other hand, is a different story.
I know Chobra's missed the first 4 days, but he's back in action. He's back here. Chobra, welcome the players to the stage.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's been a busy week, but I'm here. I'm ready. You guys know I'm ready. Are you ready? Of course you are. I know this. We have a packed crowd here. Ready. It's time to get to the first semifinal. This is going to be an excellent match, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, first up, we have the guy coming up to kind of challenge the one Zerg remaining. They're all swarming around the Zerg this time, a little bit of irony in their fates. But this player, really hungry for his first win in a StarCraft 2 tournament, really hungry to come in and prove himself that he's still a legend. It's going to be from Dead Pixels, Fantasy! And of course, his opponent hasn't dropped a single map yet here at the Intel Extreme Masters at Gamescom. The one Zerg remaining, but he's a massive, massive Zerg player coming into this tournament from SK Telecom T1. It's going to be Su! Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to find out who our first finalist is going to be, who's going to get one step closer to that trophy and also secure their spot at the World Championship in Katowice. Semifinal number 1, Fantasy versus Su.
Thank you very much, Chobra. We are all very excited for this match as Su takes on Fantasy, or should we say Fantasy takes on Su, as Su is the absolutely outstanding favorite in this tournament. He's played the tournament flawlessly so far. He is undefeated, hasn't lost a single map. He was the tournament favorite coming into it. And now Fantasy, who reaches his first ever top 4 in a StarCraft 2 tournament, now has the chance to take down this giant. But is he going to, is the big question.
Well, he is probably the most dangerous opponent that Su has faced so far. There is a lot of history between Fantasy and SKT Zergs. He really went the distance with Dark not too long ago. So I'm sure Su's coming into this very nervous. He knows what Fantasy's capable of, and it's going to be such a test for him.
But Su right now is probably playing the best StarCraft that he's played. I mean, he's always had fantastic StarCraft, don't get me wrong there, but he's just come off his first ever StarCraft 2 victory. It took him a long time to get there. Yeah. 5 second places in a row, pretty much, which kind of summarizes StarCraft 2 career for everyone who's like, okay, it's the guy who always finishes second place. But he finally got that Kespa Cup victory, and I feel that that's kind of unlocked a new tier of Su. He's got that confidence, he knows he can win, and right now, he's mentioned it to me backstage, he's mentioned it to an interview, he thinks this tournament is easily his.
Yeah, I guess he's doing really well against Terran, which probably gives him a lot of confidence here going into this Final Four, because that's all there is here for him. He has to be 2 of them, and I feel like going up against Fantasy, like a lot of people say, it's a tricky match, but at the same time, I'm not sure if Fantasy is going to be too happy about having to play Su here. I think Fantasy would have much preferred playing versus one of the Terrans that is there, because he's very confident in TVT, so I don't know, man. I'm a little bit worried for Fantasy here, I have to say, in this first match of the day there.
I mean, I think everyone is pretty worried about Fantasy coming into
this, me even more.
But Todd's really worried for him. But Fantasy is no stranger to victories. He's picked up a Brood War Championship a long time ago, 2011, a long, long time ago, was a Star League champion. It was his only StarCraft championship that he was able ever to take up. And he did have a couple of second places to his name. He was one of the greats in Brood War for sure, but he took a long time to get the ball rolling in StarCraft 2, but in the last couple of months, he's hitting it, man. He's in top 16 in the WCS ranking. He's here top 4 at the Intel Extreme Masters.
He's really starting to catch his stride finally after transitioning over, and it seemed to be a problem for at least some of the Brood War players when they started to make the move. They're like, okay, it's like learning this new game that's technically a little bit easier when it comes to the mechanics, so they got to ease up and change their mindset. And he really seems to have a great understanding. And against someone like Su, who's already had that success last year, especially as one of the most consistent players we've ever had in StarCraft 2. It's really going to be a close match, I think.
I remember when Life came to New York in the Intel Extreme Masters last season, or the season before, excuse me, and oh boy, did he just absolutely dominate the tournament, go right to the top and win it. And this is what Su is on the road to doing as well. It's his first Intel Extreme Masters. And like I said, he's blitzed this tournament, not dropping a single map. I don't think he's been challenged, though. That's the big thing about Su. And Fantasy is definitely a player to challenge him now. Fantasy's had a bit of a different road to where he is now compared to Su. He hasn't gone undefeated. He's won every single game, but he has dropped maps. So he beat Lilbo, is the first game that he picked up 2-1. He then went to win against Innovation 2-1. As you mentioned, very confident in Terran versus Terran. And then Patience, his teammate, in the quarterfinals, 3-2. Very close series, but he's the player that Su is scared of the most, he said earlier.
That's really interesting to see. I mean, obviously, Innovation, his teammate, he has full understanding of how this guy plays. Fantasy, he overcame his hurdle, which was his teammate Patience in his last tournament. So I'm sure getting over that makes things a lot easier for him. And yeah, I mean, Su should be scared of Fantasy because Fantasy has shown such fantastic Terran.
What is he scared of? Like, what exactly is he scared of?
Yeah, actually,
he's so well-rounded.
Yeah, but stylistically, actually, I wonder, like, I'm not going to answer, obviously. I'm the Protoss resident there. I feel like it's for you to enlighten us on this. Stylistically, how do you think the two match up against each other? Like, what do you think we're going to see in terms of, like, builds and, like, what they're going to be trying to do?
I think at long-winded, macro games would probably be the end
in most games.
In most games. We saw this against Doc, Su's teammate, not too long ago, maybe like a month ago. They went the distance. They had these huge games. Both of them love to macro. Both of them love to take it to the late game. And Su is especially comfortable there.
Isn't that Su's key strength, though? That is long macro games, though? So isn't that like kind of what Fantasy would be playing into?
That he would be playing into that. I think it's going to be, both of them are comfortable in the same area, so it's just going to come down to raw skill and how it ends up in terms of the...
So we're expecting long games here, boys? We're expecting
Yes, we are.
No super high progression from Fantasy?
I don't think so. I'd be very surprised if we
maybe
see
in one of the games.
He might throw it in. Yeah. Always good to throw in,
those two racks never work anymore, though, because nobody really does it. And when I saw it, it didn't. It got scouted.
True.
Proxy Reaper is probably much more likely.
So I know we're almost ready for the game now. We're going to be going to that very, very shortly. But what do you think is the key to success then for both players? Let's start with Su, first of all. What does he need to do to secure a position to play at the World Championship for the Intel Extreme Masters?
I think it just comes down to he's got to be on top of his mechanics this game. Fantasy is very good at, multiple prong attacks, putting the Zerg out of position. He just has to stay on top of everything. Like his teammate did. I'm sure he had a lot of talks with his teammate going into this as well as Innovation, saying, like, how should I approach this? And it just really comes down to raw mechanics, in my opinion.
How important is dealing damage early on going to be here for Fantasy?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty big importance. Looking to catch that rhythm early on, get that momentum in the early game, so Terran can close it out in the mid to late game.
So you're saying one of the most important parts to look here for is for Fantasy dealing damage early, and if he doesn't, let's say that he doesn't deal damage, is Fantasy going to start to get in trouble with Su?
It can. If Su's left alone for that long, things are just going to go very pear-shaped very easily.
I feel like there is some Zergs that, if you let them drone to their ideal drone counts, 70 plus, 80 plus, you're going to be in trouble. But against Su, it's like, you might as well get out. Like, and if he gets there really fast, it's over.
Something really interesting to note as well is Fantasy might throw in more mech these days because it's kind of changing towards the more mech style, which is getting more and more unbeatable in the late game, and Su has had problems against that in the past.
Let's talk about the psychological side of StarCraft for a quick second here. Fantasy gets into that booth, and he knows who he's playing against, one of the best Zerg players in the world, if not the best, and he hasn't dropped a single map in this tournament. Is that something that you think as a professional player, both of you being ex-professionals, that you get in there and you go, God, this guy hasn't dropped a single map yet. Am I in trouble? Does that actually start to creep in a bit of doubt?
Yeah, it certainly does. When you see a player like this, you know he's in his peak right now. He's in his perfect form, and he has so much experience to back him as well with all his championships last year. So I'm sure Fantasy's feeling the pressure right now.
And then you can look on the flip side of it too, right? I mean, you've been in tournaments where you haven't dropped a game or a map before. Surely, Todd, over the years, you've played Warcraft 3, and Su's in there right now. He's like, I am killing it this tournament. No one can stop me.
At the same time, though, when you start thinking like that, that's when you finally might start letting your guard down. So even though Su doesn't really strike me as this kind of guy, he's going to have to be careful there, because Fantasy, I'm pretty sure like he's not letting himself be too impressed by how by how well he's been playing in general. You know, he's probably thinking, well, you know, at the end of the day, he might have not lost a map before, but if I beat him there, it's not going to change anything. He's still out of the tournament, so all I have to do is beat him there.
All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your insight for this one. Get more from you guys a little bit later on, but it is time to start the first semi-finals of the Intel Extreme Masters here at Season 10 at Gamescom. Let's head over to the commentary team for this one. It's going to be Pig from Rotterdam.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Excellent analysis as always, as we are almost good to go with our first semi-finals of the Intel Extreme Masters Gamescom. And Pig, this is going to be perhaps a classic.
Oh, I really hope so. If we've seen the recent form of these guys, we've got a clash of titans, you know, worlds colliding, some would say. It's going to be a great matchup. Zerg versus Terran, it's been my favorite matchup for the longest time, the most action-packed one. I think we're going to see some back-and-forth action.
I think it's going to be ridiculous. Su has been on an absolute roar in this tournament, hasn't dropped the map, and to go even further than that, guys, he's been playing a little bit of ladder, and he's basically 33-1 right now on the European ladder, as he had to leave one game because he was getting ready to go to the stage. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna leave. And this one guy took a screenshot, he's gonna post it on Facebook. He's like, I beat SK Su. Well, actually he was super far ahead. But this guy just doesn't lose. But still, perhaps this man in the left bottom side of Iron Fortress will be the first one to really defeat him in this tournament. It is Fantasy.
He has his work cut out ahead of him because he has to make it through. His opponent spawning here in the top left-hand side of Iron Fortress. It is SKT's Su.
It's going to be such a cool best of 5. I mean, just even looking at, you know, the run that Su had so far. A lot of people just look at Wikipedia and they're like, oh, Su, you know, okay, he won 2 best of 3s in the group stage and then he won the quarterfinals. Well, okay, that's solid, but that's kind of what we expect from him. But it's so much more than that. Su started off in the Korean qualifier, won 3 best of 3s in a row, dropped 1 map to Dongdaegu, then went on to the final to the Asian qualifier, where he had to go up against absolute titans like TY, like SOS. And he was still able to only drop a single best of 3 back then, but in the end, you know, he still made it through the lower bracket to join Innovation, a player that we are going to see in the second semifinal later today, that was going to represent Korea. And most of the time when you're going to represent Korea in a foreign tournament pick, you're pretty good.
Oh yeah, Fantasy down here. He's been on a roll this year, steadily powering up throughout, getting better and better performances. And the set everyone's been talking about going into this is how he almost toppled SKT Dark earlier in the year in Kespa Cup. And he's just been getting better and better, especially in this matchup, his TVZ. He plays such an aggressive style.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about it off air. You're expecting a lot of heavy 2-base aggression openings from Fantasy, right? And the type of opening that you need to do some damage with.
Absolutely. I think he will mix in some of those 3 command center economic openings, but I think a lot of these games he's going to say, my goal here is to try and interrupt Su and slow him down as much as possible. However, on the other side of things, Su lately has been playing very 2-basey, right? He's been rushing towards those Mutalisks, so maybe Fantasy will have to take a step back and kind of delay that aggression until a bit later on in the game.
Yeah, it's funny because in one of the interviews before, one of the previous days, Su mentioned that he really loves going for the 3-hatch double Evo chamber and then into Mutalisk. But I kind of felt he was tricking all of us, because I feel most of the time when it truly matters, you know, when he really has to win a game, you see him open up with 2-base Mutalisk. And I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with giving out some false information, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Su was even saying in the interview, he was saying, I love 3-base. I wish I could do this every game, but this just seems to be working. So maybe I'll just mix in fast Mutalisks. It seems to make the Terran players uncomfortable. And I think that's exactly what he'll be wanting to do here. This is Iron Fortress, of course, a big 4-player map. So Fantasy's opted for this fast command center first, very economic opening so far. And looking at the spawning locations, do you think this is pretty pretty good for Fantasy?
I was actually about to ask you, as a Zerg player, I'm sure you've played plenty of ZvTs on Iron Fortress. I think this could be okay. I think it's easier to defend against run-bys later on as well, because the moment you go up against a Zerg like Su with his fast-moving units, if you play cross-map Iron Fortress, it's almost impossible not to take damage from counterattacks. And I feel when you spawn vertical, it's slightly easier. You can knock down a cooling tower, you can throw down a bunch of supply depots, maybe a bunker tucked in somewhere in between, and then I think it becomes a little bit easier that once you move forward with a real actual push and you get one decent engagement, you can immediately put a lot of pressure on one of the bases of Su.
That's going to be the aim there. As the game progresses, of course, it becomes more and more about your presence on the map in this matchup. The creep spread, pushing that back is Fantasy's real goal as the game goes on. And, oh, Su coming in, diving in with a couple of Zerglings. Looks like he's going to jump on top of an SCV, actually catching one of the only 2 Marines that Fantasy has out so far. There's no Hellions on the field yet, and he's actually getting some really nice damage here.
Yep, 6, 7, 8 SCVs that are not mining right now. Is able to pick off 2 SCVs as well and a Marine. That is absolutely worth it for just those 4 Speedlings that he lost there in the end. But yeah, once again, to go back to the point we were talking about before, I do feel it's a lot easier for a Terran to get a sort of staging ground in between both bases as well, and then set it up and then rally all the reinforcements to that point. While if you, for instance, have to play cross-map, it's a lot easier for Su to pick off reinforcements, and Terrans will often rally their reinforcements towards the natural or third base because they don't want to lose them one by one.
I have to agree with you there, Roddy. And interestingly enough, we've just seen both players get their first crucial pieces of information. Fantasy with his Hellions spotted there's no third base down from Su yet. He realizes this is a more 2-base oriented move, but he's not sure yet. Is it Roaches? Is it Mutalisks? He doesn't have that information just yet.
He doesn't know it for sure, but of course, just like us, Fantasy has been watching a couple of these games off Su in the previous days, and he knows that Su loves this opening. I kind of like this opening by Fantasy as well, because I think stuff like this is very economic. These 2 SCVs taking a break. Look at that, man. I may not ever be as good in StarCraft as Fantasy, but at least I use shift as soon as I build a building, Pig.
Hey, SCVs need that smoke break, man. They're just down there, and that delay on the 1-1 as well. Little bit of a hiccup in Fantasy's build order, but let's assessing this build order, this is the greediest, most economic build you can do.
That's really cool. Small things like this are very big already. Su wanted to get that hatchery down 30, 40 seconds ago, but 2 times Fantasy swings in, picks up the drone, and he's coming back. He wants to get it one more time. Su, of course, is not going to fall for it. The first one, he's like, oh, that was just unfortunate. And the second one was like, hey, I see what you're doing here. And obviously, there's no way he's going to be able to do it 3 times in a row. But this is one of these small things, you know, whether you play Terran, Protoss, or Zerg. If you send out that one work and you want to expand and you lose it, that's like, oh, bummer. If it happens again, you're like, man, this is ridiculous. Like, I was trying to expand 45 seconds ago. And that can actually have a pretty big impact on this game later on.
At this level of play, those little things add up over and over again. Missile turrets coming down here for Fantasy at a very nice timing, as we do see those Mutalisks in that production tab. Fantasy looking to ramp up that production now. His Hellions back in quite a defensive stance. Medevacs are about to start pumping out, and Fantasy looks like he's going to be going for the third base a little bit further away from Su, not going for that hyper-aggressive forward location.
Su's going to try to drop some creep over here, so he's going to basically say, anything that you can do, I can do slightly better. You may have picked up my drone, but I'm going to drop some creep over here, and that means that it's going to be very frustrating for you to land this command center, especially because the only Marines are out of position as well, which may give an opportunity to these Mutalisks to be annoying, maybe get a cheeky add-on.
Oh, look at this, diving straight between the gap and the missile turrets. Su has found a weak point with his Mutalisks. All of those Marines are busy dealing with that Overlord, and there are so many SCVs going down.
Yep, 7 SCVs already. Why get an add-on if you can actually get 7 or even 8 SCVs? Some of these Marines have to be careful as well. They've already stimmed once, and they don't even have combat shield yet. These Mutalisks could potentially fight it, but of course you would rather get 4 SCV kills, guaranteed SCV kills that is, as 11 SCVs have gone down. Things were looking quite alright for Fantasy, but this hurts a little.
Oh, that really does slow down his build-up. Taking that SCV damage right when he wants to be picking up his production, we can see he's very mineral-starved right now. His third base being delayed a little bit. And this is great for Su because it's bought him a lot of time to spread that creep in the middle, but Fantasy's not done yet. He wants to get some aggression done. done.
This is very nice by Su, picking up reinforcements despite of these vertical spawns that we mentioned in the start of the game. Makes it a little harder to do stuff like this. Su has to be a little bit careful because most of the Bailings are not ready yet. Bailing speed is also not ready yet. Look at this timing by Fantasy, perhaps a little bit fortunate, but still though, he's hitting on a very, very good moment. Most of these Marines do survive.
Oh, the Banelings coming in. The last couple of Banelings do manage to clean up those Marines, and these Mutalisks are picking most of them off. The next squad of Marines coming in. He's so deep on creep. These Marines need to stay alive. Oh, the Mutalisks are starting to go down. So many Mutas dying here.
That's actually really good for Fantasy. Even if he doesn't end up winning the game over here, he has reduced the Mutalist count severely. 6 Mutas have gone down, a bunch of Bailings have gone down, and Su will stabilize. Su will survive for now. Look at all these upgrades that just finished for Su. That's ridiculous. This couldn't really have been on any better moment for Fantasy, who did not start +2 armor, by the way, as Funka is trying to desperately tell us.
He does pick it up just now, along with that second factory. Looks like Fantasy's going to start transitioning to that bigger, heavier, stronger, later production phase. But interestingly enough, Fantasy's continuing to build Hellbats rather than Widow Mines here. So this is a bit of a change up in the composition.
That's really cool as well. We saw Fantasy yesterday in some of those TVPs that he played, and he also has a unique approach to TVP, where he makes way more Widow Mines than most people do, as these Mulas will start working on this reactor. That's the add-on of this starport, and actually he's almost going to be able to get it. You need to repair it real quick. 11, 10, 9, 8, and he's going to be fine for now.
Dousing the flames, the SCV gets there just in the inch of time. Fantasy and Su both looking very equal on supply right now. I really love that timing Fantasy hit, realizing that Su, he's done a 2-base muta build, he doesn't have as much lava, and you've even delayed his 3rd base. He just hit that very crisp timing before, and I think this has really equalized things.
It was so funny, because he hit 10 seconds before Bailing speed was ready, then all the Bailings were pretty much used up, didn't get the connections they were dreaming of, and then by the time that the fight ended, that's finally when 1-1 kicked in as well for Su. But despite all those minor anti-timings for Su, he was still able to stabilize, he was still able to defend, and I really think him picking off that one medevac and doing quite a bit of damage on that second medevac helped him so much in defending, because imagine if those Marines all have 1 or maybe even 2 more medevacs above them, it's going to be a little bit harder already for Su to pick up those Marines with just a couple Lings and Queens.
Looking at this production tab, it's actually very fascinating. We see Blue Flame on the way for Fantasy. We see +3 weapons already, as well as +1 vehicle weapons and Thor production. It really looks like Fantasy wants to be going for that Marine, Hellbat, Thor composition, and only just starting to add Marauders in now. This is a lot different to what we normally see.
And the only thing I'm a little bit worried about for Fantasy right now is the creep spread. He hasn't really done a very good job in denying anything. Doesn't have too many scans perhaps available either to take them all out. I love how he spreads his tumors out as well, because a single scan doesn't take out all the creep tumors. There is still one creep tumor there on the left side of this dotted circle.
Oh,
that is going to stay active for a bit.
That is actually so annoying for Fantasy. Look at this Ling Bane. Su's actually wanting to take a fight here. He wants to force his way on top of Su's army. Su's army is very spread apart. He doesn't have a lot of anti-Baneling, and his upgrades are only just finishing after all of his Marines are going down.
Well, I mean, it is off creep after all, and even though there are quite a few Lings and Mutalisks surviving, I think with a little bit of micro, well, ooh, that's more Banelings.
There's so many more Banelings. All these expensive units going down for Fantasy. Su has hit his timing so perfectly here. Seeing he had that upgrade advantage or upgrade equality for just a few seconds, he is going to come into the natural, and he wants to finish the game right here.
Still a lot of Zerglings, and his Thor is definitely caught in a very awkward place over here. He's going to pick it up one more time. Has to pull SCVs, has to keep this bunker alive. If this bunker falls, this missile turret is going to be an easy pickup as well. From that point on, it's going to get very difficult for Fantasy to stabilize. He ends up losing the bunker, loses the missile turret, loses 12 more SCVs.
Oh, so many Zerglings coming in here, so many SCVs going down. The 3rd command center being targeted by those Mutalisks. Fantasy is taking unrecoverable damage here. Su is looking to take a very quick game 1. He wants to go up 1-0 in this series, but
keeps the orbital alive though. Well done, Fantasy. It was running so low on HP, I could swear that it was going to die. It didn't die, and during all this, he did start 3-3. Of course, this is still not a very lovely scenario for Fantasy to be in, because he's down in supply, he lost a lot of expensive units, lost a lot of SCVs, but he's still in there because he kept that orbital alive.
He's going to need a heroic defense to hang on for the next few minutes. He needs to get that supply count up. He needs to hang on and just defend. Su, on the other hand, has no no plan to go to Hive Tech. He just wants to mass units here, and it looks like he's just going to come in with the Mutalisks into the main.
Oh, loved it. Couple Widow Mines stuck behind this starport, getting really big hits, and we've seen games like this before on Iron Fortress, where sometimes this could be the moment for a Terran to get a little excited. Once again, look at this single creep tumor that survived that one scan. It just keeps moving forward, and that's so frustrating for Fantasy, and especially because he's ended up losing so many SCVs already. If you're Fantasy right now, you don't want to throw down 3, 4, 5 he missed this one again. He's like, all right, not again. I'm finally taking it out. but this hurts his economy, man. He lost so many SCVs.
That is so painful. Fantasy right now, though, his mission is to buy time. He has a drop on the right-hand side of the map that was pulling Su's army out of position, but Su is hungry. He knows he has an army advantage right now. He wants to take the fight to Fantasy, and he wants to do it soon. He knows that 3-3 is on the way.
Yeah.
+3 weapons has actually kicked in, but I think Su is going to want to take a fight very soon.
I mean, we've seen a lot of games. Whenever I see this scenario, I always think back of Polt's games in 2013, right? Polt with his 3-3 bio against the Zerg gets on 4 or 5 bases, but never went up to Hive Tech. Then eventually the Zerg just runs out of steam. Now, those Zergs, they are not Su, and they will never be Su, as there is only one Su. So this isn't necessarily a bad situation for Su to be in, as he's getting 37 banelings. But he does have to be very careful, because, you know, no Hive, 3-3 bio can do terrible, terrible things to a Zerg army.
The big issue with Fantasy's composition, though, is he is Hellbat focused, and Hellbats are so weak against Banelings. Without any Widow Mines here to shoot down these Banelings, a massive Baneling count is all Su needs, and he knows it. He wants to take the fight, but there's a lot of Marauders in there.
And I love Marauders. There is one Big Daddy Tor as well that's like, come on, Banelings, roll into me. We've seen this a couple of times. Fantasy was perhaps paying attention to this drop on the right up side of the map as all these Banelings move forward. Look at Su, man. It's almost his composition is Baneling Mutalisk right now. Who needs something else?
Oh, this drop on the side, once again, distracting Su, allowing Fantasy to clear up more creep, getting a couple of drone kills, and this drop is just going to keep wasting time. This is fantastic.
Yeah. I love that as well. Pick it up immediately. Don't even waste time. Just fly it into the corner. Let those Mutalisks chase it for as far as they can. Perhaps now unload those Marines. Well, okay, he could have maybe bought a little bit of extra time there, but at least he bought time, cleared up some creep, and he's got that forward orbital command over here. He flew over the main base, so that's why it's not a planetary fortress like you normally see, but at least he will be able to gather some minerals from it.
We're about to have over 70 Banelings, up to 80 Banelings on the map here for Su. This army is so frightening. Fantasy needs good positioning. He needs to hold on, but his army just looks so small here.
Well, this isn't everything though, and a lot of those Banelings exploding on top of the Tors. Are we having some Marines somewhere in the back? It almost doesn't seem like it, as Su has just a ridiculous amount of Zerg units. Where does he get the money from? And I know he's been uncontested for the majority of the game, but still.
Oh, we just see the power of the Banelings against the Hellbat composition. If you've got enough Banelings in there, the Marines spend their entire fight running, and there's nothing to punish those Banelings coming in big clumps. There's no splash damage for the Terran player. We saw that Su having such a huge bank to throw into Banelings there made his army so supply efficient.
Yeah, he's not that rich anymore though. Of course, he still has a ridiculous amount of production, but still, there is no Hive. Technically, if Fantasy can just survive a little bit longer, a couple of Widow Mines here and there would really be very useful, as Fonka showing us as well that he finally has 2 on the way. Like, if Fantasy can get up to 60-70 Marines with 3-3 upgrades, I truly still believe that it's possible for him, because he is kind of low on workers, so the supply tab right now is a little bit deceiving. Army supply 77 against 100, that's not pretty, but I've seen bigger comebacks.
It definitely is possible. Never say never. And this is Fantasy, so he's never going to tap out before the very end. He is going to try and put on a strong defense here. So many Banelings crashing in through this Terran army. The Mutalisk shutting down the medevac before it could evacuate that front door. Some nice pickups here for Fantasy, but he is just outnumbered.
It just doesn't have any Marines anymore. And when you don't have any Marines, well, then all hope is gone, as GG is called, and Su takes game number 1 on Iron Fortress.
Very commanding win there for Su. It looked toe-and-toe in that early game stage, but there was just that moment there where Su kind of got in there right before the +2 upgrades were finishing for Fantasy, crashing through that army, and really seemed to know exactly how to dismantle what Fantasy was doing. He knew that these Hellbats are going to massacre my Zerglings, but if I just overcommit to Banelings and just blow them up at the beginning of the fight, suddenly you don't have anything to deal with this huge Ling Bane force.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal macro by Su. We're going to head over to a very small break, and after that we'll be back with game number 2 between Fantasy and Su. All right, welcome back to the final day of the Intel Extreme Masters here live at Gamescom, where we are in the middle of the first semi-final between Fantasy and this man that you're looking at right now, SKT1 Su, a player that has made it to 5 Premier League finals already, or even 6 by now, and of course is looking for his first final appearance at an Intel Extreme Masters event, and we all know he has what it takes to be there.
One of the favorites going into this tournament. Fantasy, though, the player he's up against, is one of the players who has that potential to upset him, and we saw him going toe-and-toe in this match. Fantasy looking very focused there, not too thrown off by that game one.
No, I mean, it was a pretty close game, and there were definitely opportunities for Fantasy to do things a little bit better. Let's not forget those the first 4 or 5 Zerglings that just did a little too much damage, and especially the first time that the Mutalisk flew into his main base. He was pretty damn ready for it. He knew exactly what he was playing against. He was throwing up 3 missile turrets. He should have been fine, but used the only Marines he had in that phase in the game to take care of that Overlord, and right on that moment, Su swept in, killed 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 SCVs or something with the first 7 Mutalisks. That's just too much damage. A player like Fantasy is not supposed to lose 12 SCVs against the first 9, 10 Mutalisks when he has 3 missile turrets out already.
Not at all, but when you're going up against Su, player like this, you can see the focus on him, almost a bit of nonchalance in his expression. He's doing what he does best. He's playing StarCraft, and he looks like a composer of an orchestra or something. The way the Overlord pulls the Marines out of position, the Mutalisks slide in. He waits for the, the Hellions aren't quite out yet, the Zerglings run into the natural. Su's just such a master of this game. He's very, very smart and very strong.
Yeah, he's very good at picking his engagements, and I was a little bit surprised to see that first big fight that was kind of off-creep, after Fantasy did his little push and had a pretty okay trade, I felt, because he took down most of the Mutalisks. He took the fight off-creep, and most of the times whenever I see the Zergs take the first big fight off-creep with their Banelings, with their Mutalisks, it is going to be relatively even, and that's then almost always good for the Terran. But Su picking that fight still gets the better end of that big fight.
Such a master here. He's looking to close it out against his opponent, the Blue Terran representing Dead Pixels. It is Fantasy.
And on the left side of Bridgehead, we're looking at the main base of one of the absolute best Zerg players in the world, maybe the best Zerg. It is Su.
Spawning in here on Bridgehead. This is a really unique map. It's one of my favorite ones in the new map pool because it does have such cool features. We've got those backdoor rocks that both players have, and that can provide a really cool point of contention. As the game progresses, it's a great counterattack path, but in the early game, we've often seen people dropping tanks behind that lately, doing all sorts of cute pressures, sometimes roach busts through there. I think the way Fantasy's shown us playing recently in this matchup, he loves those cute aggressions. I was saying, yeah, he loves 2-base aggression. It's not all in, but he likes to do these things which put the Zerg in an awkward position, whether it be a tank drop, a Hellbat Banshee timing. These are the sort of things which he excels at, and I really think he's going to go for something like that this game.
Do all Zergs send their first Overlord via the north side, the way that Su did, or was it just to make sure nothing crazy is happening near the rocks?
That is actually a very unusual adjustment, and it's new because we did see, I believe, Flash in Pro League do a 888 proxy barracks up there and then float it over the gap and land it on the other side. So since then, Zerg players are a little bit paranoid. They want to watch out for that.
It is going to be commenced at the first, though, once again for Fantasy. Nothing wrong with that. A very solid opening, while this pool first on the other side of the map for Su. He wants to make sure that he doesn't get caught off guard by some crazy cheese. I'm really excited for Bridgehead. I've said this multiple times already over this week. This really has become one of my favorite maps. When I saw it for the first time, I was like, oh my god, what am I supposed to do with a map that has double destructible rocks, has rocks at the front as well? I was like, I have no idea how this is going to play out, but it has given us so many good games already. Even at the previous Intel Extreme Masters, Shenzhen, the game between Snoot and TY. If you haven't seen it yet, guys, just go to YouTube and check out that game because it was phenomenal. And it almost seems like this map, as if nothing crazy early game happens, it seems to almost always deliver great games.
Having multiple avenues for attack can really lead to that very diverse and flexible mid-game. There's just so many avenues of attack, and it leads to a lot of different variants, and that's what I like to see, when StarCraft changes it up.
Yep. Even in the mirror matchups as well. Just the other day we had a great ZvT on this map between Snoot and Nurture. Was also very entertaining, which is great army movement, and hopefully we'll see some of that in this match. So far the build order for Fantasy is the exact same as he went for in game number 1. So I'm going to try to get a quick factory out. We'll try to get his couple Hellions going. It's going to be harder for Soot to get a little circling run by, as we do see that second refinery going down, which is a little quicker than in the previous game.
Yeah, that's a really fast second gas, actually. Probably going to be going to Hellion Banshee from there. And I was talking before about how he does like to do a Hellbat timing with Banshees sometimes, so we may see that come out of him a bit later on in the game. That fast gas going to allow him to upgrade that cloaking research. Meanwhile, it looks like Su just loving these two-base muta builds, doesn't he?
You know what I love about Banshees on this map is that there is a lot of space between the main base and the natural, so often when you park your Banshee in between, there will be drones in transit, and then you can just hover around there with your Banshee and you can try to do some serious work. Also, it's more difficult for Queens to walk over because the creep doesn't really connect both bases unless Su drops an extremely early creep tumor, but most of the time they rather spread creep out into the map than into their own natural.
Yeah, it's really good for these harassment styles. There isn't a lot of dead space around the back, which is the only downside to air harassment on this map. It is going to be interesting to see where that goes. Of course, we see the lair starting up now for Su, heading towards most likely that Mutalisk play. He just seems to love taking control with those mutas. And as we saw in last game, if he can find a slight opening, he can punish the Terran player very, very hard.
There is a little bit though, also because of the way you know, that high ground works in between the natural and the main base. That is actually an area where oracles or banshees and stuff can hide for a while, and it can be rather tricky for a Zerg to deal with because your queens won't reach it all the time.
Interestingly enough, both players not wanting to scout until just this moment. We've seen Su basically poked in, saw the first gas timing. That is all he's seen this game. And Fantasy, likewise, only just then with the Hellions went down and checked out the third base, saw the timing of that hatchery and said, oh, okay, this is a relatively normal timed third hatch, just a little bit delayed. And that's actually the cool adjustment from Su this game. He's got the faster third hatchery to make sure those Hellions couldn't stop that drone getting it down.
I mean, the armory is about to finish up, so we are going to see some pretty cool early Hellbat aggression over here, perhaps. And I like the idea over here because Su is not a guy that makes a roach war, and he won't have roaches. Even his baneling nests are often pretty damn late, so he relies on queens and zerglings. Here we go, by the way. This is what I mentioned, where the queens don't have a creep connecting both bases, so it's going to take a little while before those slow queens will be able to make their way over.
Oh.
The medevac is taking a lot of damage already, though, Fantasy. You got to make up your mind. How do you want to go about this one?
Has to boost that medevac out of there. It may have to abandon these Hellbats soon. These Hellbats are not taking a lot of damage, though. The queens take a long time to get through their hit points, and they are already forcing drones off the line. This isn't a huge investment out of Fantasy, but he does want to get a bit more damage done than this.
The medevac gets picked up, but there are a few more Hellions and Hellbats right now towards the third base of Su, trying to get something happen. But so far, Su is handling this like an absolute master, as he has just not really lost anything other than a single queen. This hatchery is taking a lot of fire. Will the queens be able to make it over here in time? I think he should be able to save this hatch, even though it is going to be a close call.
In the midst of this, Su actually dropped creep out of an overlord so his queens could get down here faster. And look at that surround on the Marines, isolating them away from the Hellbats. A beautiful pickup from Fantasy, but most of the Marines are down already.
Yeah, the Marines are down, and Hellbats are not very good against the hatch. So right now, Fantasy is probably not going to get the hatchery. He has killed a lot of Lings, and that is something, but he wanted to get the hatch. He wanted to get a little more done than he's done so far.
Oh, yeah, he wanted to get a lot more damage done, because look at this, Mutalisks are in the production tab. That is going to give Su absolute map dominance. And what anti-air is there? And eBay is only just starting. Oh, but there's no Thors on the way. And interestingly enough, Fantasy is going for mech, but is he even going to have anti-air out in time?
There's a Viking, though.
The single Viking.
And he really wants to get that overload. Don't end up losing the Viking. The Viking can actually be very useful. Well, maybe this Mutalisk is going to pick it off. You make a very good point, though. Right now, not a single missile turret is up yet. Engineering Bay has just finished up. He's going to need a lot of missile turrets. And once again, Bridgehead, there's a lot of wiggle room for these Mutalisks in between both bases. But right now, these missile turrets are not even done yet. Oh my god, this is disaster for Fantasy. An absolute disaster.
Absolutely shutting down the missile turret on the north side. side, there is a Thor in production, but it's not even halfway done. Fantasy is forced to evacuate this entire mineral line, and all these missile turrets going down. So many minerals being lost for Fantasy. Oh, trying to put on the counter pressure. These Hellions darting into the main base.
Yeah, they're already quite low on HP though, and there are a bunch of queens running around. I actually think this is still horrific for Fantasy, unless he can somehow kill 10, 15, 20 drones over here. That would be something he could work with, but just look at all of the SCVs that have gone down. 9, 10 SCVs, missile turrets, but still not up yet. Well, he gets 6 drones, and that is actually reasonable. Could have gone worse.
Oh, he got some damage there, but just having the pressure of the Mutalisks in his base meant he couldn't focus fire those drones as well as we would otherwise expect from a player like Fantasy. And now he is pinned down on 2 bases. Look at this. He's trying to float his command center to the 3rd, but once again, the Overlord is dropping creep all over that, going to delay that base for about 1 extra minute, which is a long time in a game of StarCraft.
From this point on, it's going to be very difficult for Fantasy to make a play in the upcoming minutes. You just want to defend now. Just don't take too much damage from these also annoying Mutalisks, and just try to stabilize, try to get your 3-base economy going, and try to build up an actual army, because right now Fantasy is just walking around with 2, 3, 4 heavy units. These stores are actually trapped. They can't go through.
Oh my
God, Fantasy.
He needs to move that starport on the north side. He is doing it now, but look at this. He tried to skimp on those missile turrets, saying, I've already taken damage. I don't want to replace the missile turrets I lost, and because of that, he took even more damage there.
17 roaches on the way as well. While these Hellions do get some work done, once again, I've no idea how these Hellions even make it to the other side of the map when there are Mutalisks pretty much seeing everything, and there's supposed to be creep when we're seeing them come as well. But look at the amount of roaches already on the way. There were 17 roaches on the production tab for Su.
Oh, 2 tanks are building at a time, and that is exactly what Fantasy needs against this. A lot of tanks. But remember, this is Bridgehead. There are multiple attack routes. If he takes those back rocks down, the front is so far from the south.
All those mules have just been dropped. They still had a lot of time left, a lot of potential minerals to be mined, but these mules will pick them off. One mule does go down, but it's going to slow down the economy of Fantasy even further. He does have 57 SCVs. That's not all that bad. But you know, on Bridgehead, we mentioned it, the double destructible rocks. How is Fantasy supposed to have enough units over here in his natural and also on the north side in his 3rd base? This is going to get extremely tricky.
He doesn't even see it coming until right now. All of his units are up on the north side defending his 3rd. He still hasn't reacted. The rocks are down. The roaches are flooding in.
But even if he saw it by that moment, like, his units are slow. They're so far out of position. This one Thor doesn't stand a chance at all. These few Vikings may be able to put up a fight against the Mutalisks, but that doesn't change the fact that these roaches could just run into the natural and absolutely ravage this mineral line.
Oh, Su is going to kill all the SCVs down here. The army from Fantasy slowly making its way back, but it is forced to attack into the roaches in disarray. The mech army needs to be together in a ball, but look at this. It's just a paltry number of units being overrun by the swarm.
Nah, there's just way too much Zerg. Su strikes again with his ridiculous macro and his excellent early game hold, as GG is called, and he has still not lost a map. He's right now 1 map win away from making it to the finals of the Intel Extreme Masters here in Cologne without dropping a single map.
He's just on hot form today. That defense was impeccable. I really feel like Fantasy needed to get a lot more damage done at the start, and Su is just so calm and collected. He just dealt with that like it was nothing.
Yeah, he did it so well. I mean, the hatchery took a lot of damage, and on a certain point, I thought it's going to be close. First, I thought, like, he's probably going to be able to save it, and then I was like, uh-oh, the queens are still in the natural. They have to run all the way through the main base, go down that ramp, and right now there's only Zerglings, but Zerglings are not very good in buying time against 5, 6 Hellbats, a medevac, and a few Marines. But you mentioned it, he got the perfect sort of wrap around the Marines, forced those Marines to be picked up. The moment those Marines were picked up, they were not doing any damage anymore, and then Fantasy had to choose. Do I go for the queens? Do I go for the hatch? And in the end, he just didn't really get the job done. And even before that, against the first 4 Hellbats, just with those queens. Su is so good, always knows when he should focus the medevac, when he should stop focusing the medevac immediately, when he has to switch targets to the queens. It all looks so simple, but there's so much art to it.
There really is. That attack can spiral out of control so quickly if you handle it any differently. And Fantasy there looking just a little bit uncomfortable.
Okay, well, we are almost ready to hop into game number 3. But before we do that, we're going to check in with the boys real quick at the analysis desk, as they perhaps know what Fantasy is lacking so far in game number 1 and 2.
Thank you very much, boys. Welcome back to the analysis desk. Joined again, just as before, with Todd and Moonglade. things aren't going too well for Fantasy here. I mean, Su is playing out of his mind. As we expected, he continues his undefeated run throughout this tournament. 2-0 currently versus Fantasy. What's going wrong for Fantasy?
Roddy was asking us. I'm not sure. Maybe some macro mechanics. I don't hear something like that. I don't know.
I mean, you mentioned before we went live is that should have been the way that Fantasy likes to and should play, is to play that long game.
Right.
But one of the important things you brought up is, well, both of you said, is that Fantasy needs to find a way to do damage to this guy early, otherwise it is going to get out of control, and he doesn't seem to be finding
He's
that.
just not finding any way in, which is so hard against Su. You know, his creep spread is immaculate. It's the most beautiful thing to, as a Zerg player, I'm like, this is inspirational stuff. And, you know, on first map, it was, despite him, like, trading pretty evenly in some of these early engagements, Su never let down with that creep spread, which helps him so much in the later game. And, yeah.
I think last game for me, the mistakes by Fantasy were pretty clear. Like, when he first got in with the Hellbats, the first few ones, he was fighting queens. He was just kind of dancing around instead of directly going for drones, trying to kill a lot of them.
Yeah.
He didn't kill really any drones, just a very, very few one with a lot of attacks. And then behind this, what's up with his base and the turret placements? That's ridiculously bad. Like, he puts one turret in the corner of his base. Mutas are always going to go on the other side and snipe a lot of SCVs. It's Su you're playing against, not Nurture. Like, he's not going to fly into the turret and lose everything.
That was definitely a weakness in that map and the previous one too, right? I mean, the turrets weren't even existing in game number 1. He took so much damage there.
Yeah.
That's obviously a big mistake he has to change. He's got to build these turrets in the right places because he will get abused. But I want to talk a little bit about what is going through Fantasy's mind, because game number 1, I think he kind of goes and gives it his all. He plays a pretty standard game. He gets beaten up. He makes a couple of mistakes. He loses it. Game 2, though, change of style, change of opening, change of mech.
Completely different.
To mech, completely different.
Yeah.
Is mech viable and a good choice on that map, or is his Fantasy just looking at completely different ways to play?
I think he's trying to really throw off Su. Like, he's trying to, that's like a great mix-up going from like the bio, you know, in game 1 to mech in game 2. If Su is not on top of everything, he can just get completely caught out by that army composition. But Su is kind of just inside his head right now. He knows exactly what's going on, and he made all the right choices to take him apart before it gets to the scary late game with mech.
It feels like Susan is on another level and Fantasy is not on his A game. That's why, like, right now for him there is no way. He needs to wake up and he needs to play way better than he's played up until now.
All right, so just wake up, step up, and give it your best. Otherwise, this is going to be 3-0, right?
That's right. It's looking that way.
Well, sad for Fantasy, but awesome news for Su, obviously, as he continues his undefeated run here at the Intel Extreme Masters. Game 3 is ready. Let's head back to the commentary team.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I do hope that Fantasy eventually checks out this VOD just so he can get some advice in TVZ from Todd.
Like you know, you can't afford advice like that as a player. You've just got to take it when you get it, when you're lucky enough for Todd to bestow some wisdom there.
Yeah, you know, if I was Fantasy, I'd be like, you know what? This Protoss, this low GM Protoss on the European server, I really appreciate it that he's giving me some pointers over here going up against Su. As we're getting ready to hop into game number 3, which is going to be played on Terraform. You know, we were talking a little bit about it as well. I think mech on Bridge was an okay idea, but it's just the Mutalisk. Like, the Mutalisk just did way too much damage, and of course the Hellbat didn't really do the damage, which, you know, all jokes aside, Johan did mention. I kind of felt he could have gone for the drones as well. Like, I feel like you have to make a decision. Either go all out on the queens and try to win that battle, or just be like, okay, I know I'm going to lose these units, but at least I'm going to take a lot of drones with me to the grave. But it felt like he was indecisive. He was walking towards the middle line, but then he went to the queens again. It's just like, make up your mind.
Yeah, he kind of ended up just backed into a corner and being like, I get that he's trying to waste time, right? He's trying to distract Su so the other attack can hit the front, but you want to get something done with, that's 4 Hellbats and a medevac. Like, that's a lot of money you're investing into it.
Yeah, it felt like he was really afraid of losing all of it and also end up losing the medevac because he took some damage already. Either way, it's going to have to be a lot better for this man. You guys are going to have to be quite loud if you want to see some more TVZs, at least in this semi-final. Spotting in the right bottom side of Terraform. He's representing that Pixels. Give it up for Fantasy.
He's going to have to make it through. His opponent up here in the top left, though, it is SK Telecom Su. An absolute powerhouse Zerg, the favorite to win the whole tournament here, and he's showing why he is considered the favorite. Immaculate play so far, and almost looking like he's been a tier above Fantasy in those previous 2 games.
Do you think that this is a moment where some, let's say Classic and the other finalists that we've had so far, who the Classic player parting, for instance, do you think they're watching this tournament and be like, ooh, with IEM Katowice coming up in a couple months and the winners or, the finalists of every IEM qualifying, I actually wouldn't really mind it if Sue gets eliminated over here.
I think I would be thinking that if I was in their shoes. I'd be saying, yeah, I probably don't want to be playing Stu at Katowice for hundreds of thousands of dollars, man.
But so far it looks like Sue is on a mission. He wants to do well over here and he wants to secure his ticket as well towards the grand finals at the end of the year. He's up 2-0 against Fantasy. We're looking at Terraform right now. I think this is one of the most straightforward, straight-up maps. I often feel whenever you're confident, whenever you feel like you're better than your opponent, playing on Terraform is not a bad thing to do at all.
I agree. It's a very straightforward map in some regards. However, because there's a lot of choke points out in the middle, recently we've seen a big resurgence of mech on this map specifically. So Fantasy, he did show he wanted to do it last game, may want to do it again here. Interestingly enough, though, first of all, I wanted to talk about Fantasy's build. Look at this, a barracks first gasless opening with very fast Marines. I've seen him do this before on this map up against Dark, and he's going to try and hunt down this Overlord. So we see a fast command center here at the natural. Su's trying to take refuge on the high ground.
Does he see it already, Su? Yeah, he did spot it already. He knows what he's playing against. I think this Overlord, well, actually he's in a little bit of trouble. There's probably a reason why Fantasy is going for this build. This one Marine is getting high ground vision because, well, he's standing on the high ground over there. That's actually going to allow him to get that first little Overlord kill. That's nice, that's just one of these things. If you're Su right now, you don't want to end up losing an Overlord at the 4-minute mark. That's just annoying. That's just frustrating. But at the same time, he also knows he has nothing to worry about. No crazy replay yet. Another command center going down. Like, this is where things get interesting.
All right. This is a cool build. The most greedy build. The whole point of those Marines is they're going to deny as much vision as possible. They are on the warpath. Yeah. If they can shut down this Overlord, then Su will have no vision on the map.
Su's probably getting a little bit nervous as well. He's like, I definitely don't want to end up losing this Overlord. Fantasy should not have vision, though, on the high ground over here, so he should never be able to kill it. Unless he would fly over his Rex, but then he's extremely committed to killing this Overlord and making sure there are no other units running across the map, because he would just straight up die.
This is a really cool opening out of Fantasy, trying to press that economy as hard as he can. And for Su, he may be thinking, what are the options? Why would someone do this one racks opening? Because it's not the most efficient play. It's actually quite inefficient in many regards, but because you deny vision and you kill that Overlord, suddenly it evens out. And there's sorts of really fast, cheesy timings you can do off this, but there's also this opposite spectrum, and it looks like Su he's playing middle of the road against it.
Yeah, for some people who wonder, it's like, oh, I saw this build being used in Wings of Liberty a lot. I haven't watched a whole lot of StarCraft lately. Why wouldn't Terrans like this? The main issue is that Marines are not very fast, and they won't really give you a whole lot of map presence for a while. Hellions is a lot better to have out on the map because they're faster, they're better against Zerglings, or even a Reaper that is also a lot faster and will give you a much better scout. With just Marines, there is only so much you can do, and often when Marines make it to a certain part of the map, there's almost no return anymore. They will pretty much always die, while some of the other Terran units, they can still make it out of there.
Yeah, Marines not the most mobile, especially when you're facing Zerglings. Here, Fantasy, though, looking like he's going for the double factory opening, a cheeky second factory. Thinks maybe some Blue Flame Mass Hellion attack?
Could be. It's old school. I've always liked that build, by the way, in TVZ. I know it fell out of fashion because I know there is a huge commitment to it. But of course, he already sniped at first Overlord, makes it a little harder to scout. And if you say, like, Zergs often prepare for 4 to 6 Hellions. Sometimes they expect Hellbats, so they get a few extra Queens. But there is a huge difference between preparing for 6 Hellbats or for 12 Hellions with Blue Flame. They could just ignore Queens. They could just drive by. A lot of Roaches, by the way, already on the production depot. Though. It seems like Su actually wants to become the aggressor.
He looks like he's preparing for a big Roach Baneling attack. Now, he's gone 3 Queens, he's got a lot of creep spread, he's got a 3rd hatchery, so for all intents and purposes, as what Fantasy sees here is he sees a regular build.
But if Fantasy spots these Roaches in time, he already has a factory with a tech lab. He should queue up a tank immediately, correct?
Yeah, if he sees it coming though, but look at the paths on Terraform. There's so many paths that are so far apart, and Su is being so smart about this. He's taking that northern route with his roaches, going all the way around.
Oh, Hellions on the north side though. This would be a massive scout for Fantasy. He spots the Overlord. Does he go further? He pretty much needs to start a tank as soon as he sees it, right?
Oh, even then, like these roaches are so close right now. As these Zerglings are flooding across, they're going to make Banelings. They'll flood it in.
He's going to see it now.
He needs a tank. Hellions cannot defend against this attack on their own.
All right, there we go. Siege tank on the production tab immediately. He's going to have a lot of links. He could, even in the worst case scenario, temporarily abandon the low ground. It is completely acceptable for Fantasy to lose a bunch of SCVs. He could even lose 20 SCVs or so. He has 3 command centers. He just needs to make sure that he doesn't die right here and right now, because that would be the end of his run at the Intel Extreme Masters in Cologne.
Oh, the Banelings are starting to crash through the wall. Already taking down a few SCVs, pulling back the Banelings. Su being very careful with this. That tank is almost out, but it's not ready just yet.
Well, I actually think with the tanks sieging up right now on the high ground, there are not too many Banelings left. You want to make sure you raise those depots. Of course, a lot of SCVs have gone down. There's still 7, 8, 9 roaches over here. Hellions are morphing into Hellbats. They have to protect this siege tank at all costs, and this tank is doing massive damage.
Oh, suddenly the Hellbats plus the tank damage on this ramp is massacring these roaches. This attack is going down. Meanwhile, though, Su has got a lot of Zerglings dealing so much damage on the low ground.
Yeah, the Orbital is taking a lot of damage. I'm glad that Fantasy is lifting it up right now. He took a lot of damage, but I think this hold has been successful so far. He was even in workers. There is no layer yet for Su. Su's only ahead by 5, 6, 7 drones. This is good so far for Fantasy. This could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah, I think it's an okay situation for Su. It's not the end of the world that he didn't crash in and win, because he did have that third base we were talking about. He did have a good solid 40 drone count, and he's got to try and catch up in the tech though. Like there's the layers just starting, the Evos are just starting, whereas we do already see multiple factories and upgrades on the way for Fantasy. So even though Fantasy's supply is down a little bit, he doesn't have quite the SCV count, he's much deeper in terms of tech, economy, and production.
How many Hellions do we have on the map right now? Is there anything that Fantasy can work with? 7 Hellbats. It's hard to be aggressive right now, because if a bunch of links run in again and your tanks are exposed, then you're going to truly hate life as a Terran player. And of course, Fantasy doesn't really have any eyes out on the map right now. Has nothing that could potentially scout for him. So he's just going to throw up another factory. He's probably... I mean, Fantasy is a very experienced Terran. He can read the state of the game right now. And he will probably read it like, yeah, I took some damage, but I went for the most economic opening a Terran could possibly go for, pretty much, other than CC into Rex, into another CC. But it's pretty much the second most economic opening. He lost SCVs, but he didn't lose everything. And he even kept his first tank alive as well. I think he's okay with this, and he should be able to at least make it into a certain phase in this game without being behind.
That's definitely his goal right now. He wants to hang on. He's one game away from being eliminated out of this tournament, out of the Intel Extreme Masters, whereas Su, he just wants to finish this off, and because he saw what was happening. Oh, Hellions running in.
And all of the units are out of position for Su as well. Fantasy strikes back. He's going to get 10 drones immediately, and he's not even done yet. This is very, very successful harassment so far. By far the most success he's had with any Ling or Hellion run by in this series. 16 drones gone down. And look at this, it's still alive. And that was just the biggest thing for Su's position. Su didn't have any tech yet, no Mutalisk. It's going to make it very hard for him not to at least take some counter damage.
Oh my, another Hellion run by coming in on the south side already.
Oh
another 8 drones going down. This is horrible. Su cannot handle this damage. Fantasy is running away with this game. These Hellions darting in and just massacring Su's economy.
For just 5 Hellions, Fantasy has just killed 27 drones. That is absolutely massive. Of course, Su got a little bit unfortunate that he didn't have vision of that tiny spot in the corner of his base. But I mean, he could have had an Overlord perhaps a little bit more north. Either way, that was absolutely great for Fantasy. We weren't sure yet if the position Fantasy was good in. We're pretty damn sure right now.
He's already got a 4th command center on the way, extra factories going down, and he is actually up above 70 SCVs against just 64 drones. With the added mules to that, he is so far ahead in economy. We're going to see Fantasy's supply just blossom here.
I am very curious though, because Su being the god that he is, if you can still turn this one around, you know, an all-in that didn't really work, and then he lost 26 drones against the counter-aggression of these Hellions. Hellions again going to try to swing in at the 4th base, but there isn't really a whole lot of drones to kill over here as well, but he's going to morph it into a Spore Crawler. Well done, Su, definitely on top of it. It's like, you may fool me once, but I'm not going to end up losing too many drones. Hellbat drop, we'll try to get 1 or 2 drones, but shouldn't really get a whole lot more than this. But the most important thing for Fantasy is that he's buying time for his production to become truly scary. He's buying time for more tanks to come out, for more Tors to come out. And the Roach Hydra count is high, but without any Vipers, Su's gonna have a very, very hard time getting a favorable engagement.
We do see 1-1 upgrades for Su against +2 attack and 1 armor about to finish for Fantasy's mech army. Now keep in mind, there is no hive on the way. An infestation pit has just begun. Su doesn't really have any plan in the immediate future. He's got a very slow transition of Vipers. For the moment, he's just trying to do whatever he can with Roach Hydra to hold him back.
The Hellion Res is just relentless so far. He just keeps on doing with it. More and more drones have gone down. It almost seems like Su just wants to make something happen with the Roaches and Hydras he has on the other side of the map. These Hellions, this middle line is exposed as well. Oh my god. Let's take a look at the amount of drones that have been killed in this game. 44 have gone down already. Almost over 50 workers have been killed, well, pretty much right now in the last, what is it, 2.5 to 3 minutes?
Fantasy's Hellions are the MVPs of this game. They are just massacring Su's economy, and Su looks desperate right now. He's moving in with his Roach Hydra army. He is coming in from 2 sides, and he's going to try and break through Fantasy. This is Su's last-ditch effort here. He needs to make it happen right now.
Well, I mean, he is going up to Hive behind this, but he just wants to see if he could make something happen. But there is going to be a planetary fortress as well. There is a lot of tanks, a lot of Tors, and all these Roaches and Hydras are just getting absolutely demolished. Very solid, well, hold there by Fantasy as he just, well, he was basically just sitting there and he was receiving it, but he was receiving it with open arms. He's like, all right, give me those Roaches, give me those Hydras, I can deal with it.
Man, those tank pilots are going to be dining on Hydralisk barbecue tonight. There are so many corpses there, and that was so much gas that Su threw away. That's gas taken away from any later game composition which could deal with this. Fantasy is in the driver's seat right now. Su has to make something special happen. He has to hang on, keep spreading creep, and he needs to find a way to get around Fantasy's army. He can't fight him head on.
I think the most important thing for Fantasy is just don't go overly passive though. Like, you've been ahead right now for the last 4 or 5 minutes in this game, and you just had an absolutely phenomenal fight without really doing anything. Like, you were just sitting there and your opponent just ran into you, and well, you had way more tanks and Tors than he perhaps expected you to have. But don't be overly passive. Don't give him the chance to eventually maybe get Brood Lords and Ultralisk out, because you don't want to fight against it. Just fight against Roach Hydra if you can.
He's actually got 18 siege tanks right now.
Yeah, I like this. I like this move out a lot. It's truly time that he starts doing something. Of course, you know, moving out with mech is always a little bit scary because it's an immobile army and you feel like you're vulnerable at home because you don't have too many units left behind. But, you know, don't give your opponent too much time. Don't give him the time that he doesn't deserve.
We're playing Scan Simulator here right now. Fantasy just wants to see everything going on the map. He's made sure with scans on the side there's no counterattack in place, and now he's just looking to ram his army through here. He's going to leapfrog these tanks, making sure a few of them are sieged at all times so that Su can't engage this effectively.
Well, Su's going to be forced to fight. He does have a couple of Vipers out, but I think he's waiting for them to get enough energy. He is maxed out again, though. He was able to squeeze out enough Roaches. There are these Vipers. They're so important. The tanks are very clumped up. Imagine 2 Blinding Clouds on top of 7, 8 tanks.
There's 11 Vikings in the air, but they're not necessarily in the right position to stop these Vipers. If he does land those Blinding Clouds, it could make this fight possible for Su.
I mean, he needs the Blinding Clouds. Without the Blinding Clouds, there's absolutely no way. Here come those Vipers via the south side, and all of those tanks, they've been so clumped up. One Blinding Cloud goes down, and the second one goes down as well. Roaches come in from the north side. Su is still losing a lot, but will it be enough? Actually, I think Su should be able to stabilize over here. He's getting a lot of tanks over here, Pig.
Wow, the Roaches and Hydras actually spreading out quite well to minimize the splash damage. The Vikings do land and repel the last of it. A very good trade for Su, but keep in mind, his economy was battered back earlier. It's very hard for him to replace this Roach Hydra army.
And he doesn't have his Vipers anymore either, so the next time he's going to have to fight against all those tanks that were previously not fighting. There are 25 Roaches on the way right now for Su. He definitely needs those. If he can get all those Roaches out in a good moment, then he can crush his army, because there is a lot of supply here that won't really do anything. Like, look at all these Vikings. They're not really contribute anything to the fight. So those Roaches should be able to make the difference. Fantasy is really reinforcing this push as well. Su's making 14 more. He's getting a couple of blinding clouds. He needs to go soon though, because right now this army is an army he can crush.
Oh, it looks like Su's actually opting for the counterattack. He doesn't want to engage again until he has more blinding clouds.
No. I think he's just setting up a flank, and that's a much better idea. Like, he shouldn't counterattack right now. He needs everything at home. And I think if he uses everything, I think Su can do this once again. He is supply block. He's remaking a couple overlords. Here we go. Vipers coming in pretty much from all angles via the north side and the south side. Roaches and Hydras coming in from all angles. What a sick engagement by Su.
360-degree surround. Blinding cloud on top of about 5 or 6 of the tanks. And Fantasy's army just gets obliterated.
Su is so ridiculously good in this game. Oh my god, he was under so much pressure. This has been such a rough game for him, and he just gave us perhaps the most beautiful engagement when it comes to Zerg in this tournament. He's going to try to counterattack immediately. He hasn't won this game yet, but that was magnificent.
Su is
Zerg
just
play.
determined to get through to the finals of this tournament. It was looking like there was no way he could come back in this game, and he just says, no, I will win. I will go to these finals. I want to win this 3-0, and I want to do it without dropping a map.
He's like, haven't you got the memo, Fantasy? I haven't dropped the map yet, and I'm absolutely not planning on dropping one against you. Fantasy is doing some good counter-aggression, though. Again, getting 11, 12 drones with these Hellions, kind of evening up the worker count. But I think for Su, it's acceptable to be at 66 drones right now, because he pretty much has everything already, right? He has +3 missile attacks on the way. He has all his infrastructure, so I would say 66 drones in this phase in the game is more than acceptable.
What's going on with Fantasy's mineral count? Losing that gold base has really interrupted it. He's got 1,800 gas in the bank. Gas is meant to be your limiting factor as a mech player, but there just don't seem to be that many tanks and Thors getting out on the map. They seem to be building so slowly right now.
He just threw down like 3 more starports as well, which I'm a little bit surprised by.
He's been building 4 Hellions at a time. He's had double reacted factories. So that actually explains where all of his minerals have been going, but those Hellions haven't been pulling their weight in these big engagements. He needs a higher tank count.
Fantasy's putting so much money in infrastructure, which surprised me a little bit, because he doesn't really have a whole lot to spend, getting all these factories, getting all these starports and stuff. But of course, if he keeps that gold base alive for, you know, let's say 2 minutes, then he will be able to use it. So perhaps it is a good call. The Ultralis Cavern is going down right now, just like +3 Carapace is on the way for Su, as Su is looking for perhaps another phenomenal Zerg engagement. He's doubling the army supply right now of Fantasy. Fantasy does have a couple of planetary fortresses to fall back on, but it is very hard to always be in the right position with your mech army.
Very nice blinding clouds. However, the missile turret actually kills both Vipers. That is pretty nice for the missile turret, but losing this base is something that Fantasy can't really afford right now. Oh, it looks like Su's going to keep pressing into these tanks. These tanks are a little bit too staggered. They're not really covering each other too well, and Su picks up a nice trade-off, clipping off a good portion of Fantasy's army.
And I love how he immediately retreats right after that, right? Gets the planetary, gets 2 tanks, gets 3 more tanks behind that, and then looks on the high ground and is like, okay, I don't have to do that. I've done more than enough. I'm very satisfied with what I just achieved. Let's just back off. Let's recollect myself. Let's get new Vipers out, leech some more energy. Just don't kill your hatchery, Su. That would be funny, right?
Oh, if we saw that, I think Su would be a little bit upset. Interestingly, Fantasy's actually starting a Raven transition at only 138 supply. His army's still so small, but it looks like he wants to go straight to that end game sort of composition.
I mean, I guess you got to try to do something, but right now with 4 Ultras on the way, the next fight is going to be very difficult for Fantasy. And if you're Fantasy as well, like where do you exactly put your units, right? Like, it's going to be very difficult. He needs to make sure that he doesn't lose that base on the right top side again. At the same time, he has to keep his gold base alive.
Oh, Hellions coming in again. Fantasy's still putting the aggression on, but actually only picking up 4 drone kills for 4 Hellions. Not a good trade whatsoever. Very good pulls from Su to deflect that.
We all live in the yellow submarine pick.
Oh, Mule City, man. The income is going to go absolutely insane for Fantasy. He did invest in so many orbitals earlier, and whilst I feel it was a mistake to not be spending his gas on more tanks and Thors, and I think that kind of gave Su a bit of leeway, it's now paying off in that he can just drop endless mules, and he'll actually be able to start trading out SCVs to get a higher supply.
This barracks will get picked off, so no more factories for you for a while, Fantasy. How many Hydralisks do we currently have on the map? Because there are a couple of benches on the way. 16 Hydras, okay, that's still a very respectable number. But Su has to be careful about it, that he doesn't get too surprised. He also has to bring an Overseer. I don't think Banshees have Cloak, is that correct?
Cloak is on the way now. It's about halfway done. They are going to have it probably, just about 40 seconds time, but it looks like Su wants to shut down this top base once more.
No Overseers though. If Su picks a fight against 6 Cloak Banshees, terrible things will happen to his little Zerg army as these Hellions. Man, Su is so on top of things right now. He lost a lot of drones early on, but he tries to save every single drone he can possibly save as we speak. These Hellions do spot the double Spire going down as all of that larva gets roasted, but...
Oh, they're getting a few drone kills. Most importantly, buying time for Fantasy, though. Fantasy's adding on a sick air army here. Does lose the Hellions on the top side for naught, but it's buying time. These are minerals. Fantasy doesn't care about minerals in the long run. Look at his supply. He's getting closer to max. He's adding more and more Banshees, more Vikings. He can add more Ravens on after this. Looks like Fantasy's getting back into this game.
I was giggling because he did kill quite a bit of larva, and then Funka just shows us immediately. He's like, don't worry, he's got 67 larva. I think he's fine, Roddy. I was like, yeah, I think you're right, Funka.
He actually does have the best injects in the world. Su is always on top of those. Doesn't matter how late the game goes. Look at these queens. They've still got so little energy backed up on them.
That's almost silly, and he's been spreading so much creep during all of that as well. As both his Spires are almost ready, Su is looking for another engagement. He just wants to keep Fantasy low on supply. Fantasy doing whatever he can to buy a little time for himself with Hellion run-bys here and there. All of these sensor towers will, of course, give Fantasy a little bit more of a peaceful state of mind. He will finally know where where the units are coming from, and I do like this for Fantasy though, because Fantasy really needed time. On a certain point, Su was doubling the army supply of Fantasy, but if you take a look at the army supply right now, Fantasy is actually ahead, 128 against 120, and he still has 23 free supply to spend. So I kind of feel that Su perhaps gave Fantasy too much time to, recollect himself, to restabilize. And all these Cloak Banshees, I'm not sure where they're going, but they might be able to get a hatchery or two.
Su's actually still got so many Roaches in his army. Roaches are not very good for the amount of supply they cost. So at this point, he's got to try to find a way to get rid of those in a cost-efficient manner. Otherwise, his army just can't take a front-on fight, because Fantasy's army is getting so incredibly dense. It is getting so valuable.
I mean, I do like this Banshee Arrest, and he's going to be able to kill a crazy amount of drones at first, and then he's going to be able to kill the hatchery. Su's probably wondering, like, okay, where's that suddenly coming from as he fires up? Well, I mean, he loses 18 drones, and now the hatchery is going to fall as well. There is no saving this one. But I almost feel that Fantasy could have used this as the trump card, right? Like, Su takes a fight and loses the Overseer, and then all the Banshees show up with Cloak. Like, this is great, but if you look at the bank of Su, he has 7,400 minerals. Is killing a hatchery and a couple drones the end of the world for Su?
It's not the end of the world. It is great damage, though. I mean, in the long term, killing that many drones, like 20 drones, a hatchery, looks like he's going to get a second hatchery. This is good damage, not even canceling that. I mean, that's pretty nice for Fantasy, and Fantasy's looking to have the better army in the late game, so maybe he doesn't feel he needs a trump card. He's actually adding on 4 battle cruisers at a time right now. Yamato Cannon is upgrading. He is going for the ultimate late game mech force.
Fusion Core is dancing as well as Day9 is somewhere around the world. Very happy right now. I'm not sure what time it is in Cali, but I know he just woke up and he's doing this in his sleep as more and more battle cruisers are on their way. I mean, Fantasy is going to have a ridiculous army. Are these the first BCs, by the way, we've seen this tournament?
I think so. I don't think we've seen them up to this point. They're going to be really valuable. I mean, we were talking about Terraform before, right? We said these choke points get really nasty later on with mech. So Su's actually had problems specifically on this map before. I think it's just such a great choice for Fantasy to do this, but it's all going to come down to a couple of really big engagements. And remember, looking at Fantasy's bank, he can't really afford to replenish. But Su, on the other hand, he's got a full army replenish in there. He could build 50 Mutalisks right now.
Yeah, but do you really want to build 50 Mutalisks against all these stores?
Well, you could also build probably about 20 Ultralisks, maybe go for that instead. There's a lot of options. It's got so much choice, but it comes down to, can he do enough damage in the first fight to actually disrupt Fantasy's composition and expose a weakness in it?
Like, I don't think Su has a whole lot of weaknesses, but in the past we have seen him lose a couple of games that were almost unlosable, right? At the 35, 40 minute mark, where he just took fights that he didn't really have to take. And you know, some people are just phenomenal early game, phenomenal mid game, but then super late game. It requires a different type of skill to play StarCraft suddenly. Like, these roaches that you mentioned, it's time that Su starts, recycling these roaches. Just try to kill whatever you can with it, but get rid of it and replace them with better, stronger units.
Roach corpses are just getting blown into the river at the side of the map. They're doing absolutely nothing up here. Picking off 2 SCVs for about 25 roaches. Not the most efficient trade by any means. And Fantasy's just going to shut down all of that. Interestingly enough, Su replacing it with Ultralists. He wants this meaty ground army. He wants to crash through the ground force of Fantasy, and then he can replenish on the anti-air units.
So there's been a lot of talk about this lately, but what is the ideal composition right now for Su? Like, what do you think as a Zerg player yourself, Big?
It's really hard because it depends on your focus, right? Do you want to be forcing a fight into them, or are you looking defensive? What we'd see missing from Su's composition is Infestors, so he can't really punish the Vikings and the Ravens when they come forward with any sort of fungal growth. He's very much relying on Hydras, Queens, and Corruptors for anti-air.
Yeah, he has a couple Vipers in the mix. Could drop a few Blinding Clouds. There are still so many tanks, though. Is Su going to go for it or not? Yes, he is. Yamato cannons are going down.
A lot of the Ultras are trapped at the back, though. They're only going in 1 or 2 at a time.
Oh, my God. Su's army got absolutely massacred over here. As Fantasy still on 180 supply and Su only on 80. Su's going to try to spend his bank right now. He's making 15, 25 Corruptors and 5 more Ultralists, but that was a very, very painful fight. I don't want to see the army graphic at the end of the game.
I don't know why Su would fight there. It was such an awkward angle, but he seemed to think, hey, the air units are exposed. This is my chance. Let's go. And it just did not work out as he expected. Fantasy's army was well spread out. There was nothing to punish the air units being clumped up at the front. The Vipers only landed 1 Blinding Cloud, and Fantasy's kept that army intact. Meanwhile, we've seen Su completely just spend his whole bank.
Yep.
His next army has to be efficient. He can't throw away another force like that.
I mean, it's 3-3 mech as well, and he's still working on these air upgrades. He's not there yet, man. He only has +1 carapace as well, and that makes a massive difference. People often forget about stuff like that, but, if anyone is fighting with 3-3 Marines against 1-0 Lynx, we don't even consider it a fight because we know how it's going to end. And sometimes we forget about that when it comes to mech against some of these air units. But right now, Su is extremely far behind in the upgrade department.
Oh, so many Corruptors here, but they don't have the best upgrades just yet. Oh, a couple of them going down to these Vikings. 3 Corruptors already going down. Looks like Su wants to take the fight. He's had enough. The Corruptors are going in, and he's just losing even more of them. Doesn't take down a single mech unit.
He's lost 5 Corruptors there already. He has a few more on the way, though. But this army supply, once again, Fantasy has even sacrificed SUVs before. Fantasy's army, this pure army, 174 army supply. That's just absolutely insane.
The power of mules in this endgame, the ability to just oversupply this army. You don't need workers, you've just got these mules that don't take up supply mining for you, and Fantasy's just very patiently pushing his way around the map and trying to secure these new expansions.
Slow and steady wins the race as we are edging in on the 40-minute mark over here on Terraform.
Oh,
but I'm suddenly
actually walking right into this Ultralisk army. That's actually a bit scary for Fantasy. The Ultras are getting good surface area, but there's just so much firepower. A lot of the ground army going down for Fantasy, but his air army is remaining strong. The Yamato cannons blasting these Corruptors out of the sky.
As GG is called, and Fantasy will win this game on Terraform. A very long back and forth game as Su finally drops his first map of the tournament, and perhaps this is what Fantasy needed to get some momentum going into this series. Man, this game is like almost impossible to summon up because it started off with that Roach Bane against the double factory opening. Su was in a pretty okay position at first, even though I like Fantasy's position all along. The Hellion counter harass was great. Then suddenly the Roach Hydra fight was amazing for Su, and it looked like he was going to end up winning this game. I think he just gave too much time to Fantasy. I think he should have pushed harder and harder, because when a player like Fantasy starts working with 174 pure army supply, 3-3 mech, and a little bit of everything, what are you supposed to do?
It's just so difficult. Su there, looking slightly frustrated that he wasn't able to close it out. He did have his opportunities that game, and he just wants to get to the finals. You can tell he's like almost a little bit impatient at some points that game, going for the Roach Baneling. I think it was a good build decision, but Fantasy just held on strong. And do you feel like, I mean, he was in such a good position after those Hellion run-bys. You kill 45 drones, you've got to feel like you're in a good spot. I was thinking there that he might even be a little bit upset that he didn't close that game out maybe 20 minutes sooner. The fact that like Su actually crushed his mech army, I think Fantasy's got to tighten it up in this next map because I don't think Su's going to give him another opportunity to get back in there like that.
Well, it was an extremely long game, a very exhausting game as well, so we're going to give the players a couple of minutes to recover, and let's check in with the boys at the analysis desk to see what they have to say about that game on Terraform.
Thank you very much, Rotterdam, and of course, Pig. Excellent commentary as always. And what a series this is now turning into, boys, because Fantasy stopped him. Su has now suffered his first loss in this tournament so far. He's lost a map. But let's really get nitty and gritty about that last map there, because Su opened up with a very aggressive build that didn't work, and Fantasy held on by the skin of his teeth and was able to push forward from that Moonglade.
Funny story, actually. I was backstage, and I was told to rush back here very quickly because the series was about to end, apparently.
Everyone was saying that back here. Was like, get in position, he's about to do it.
Yeah, it was that close as well. I mean, that tank coming out at the right time and the Hellbats on top of the ramp, holding on just. And even besides that, Fantasy did take some decent economic damage, but he did get those early 3 CCs, so he could come back into it.
How did he come back into it? Obviously, he's got 3 command centers, but he took so much damage there.
Yeah, he really kind of stabilized from there, and as you saw throughout the game, these Hellion run-bys just were doing ridiculous damage, which is something you always have to worry about when you're playing up against mech, especially when Blue Flame is kind of finished up. And it's kind of always been a weakness Su has had throughout this, this year, especially when we've seen more and more mech become available. Like the late game comes around, Su doesn't put up spine crawlers, he doesn't have anything in place to really stop these Blue Flame Hellions coming in, and the damage adds up.
Yeah, I mean, what, like 30, 40 workers during the mid game there, if not more, throughout the entire of the map. But he's found the kryptonite there in Su's play. And I guess in game number 1 and game number 2, he never really had the opportunity to find that weakness. But he really, really exploited it in game number 3. And I'm sure that's going to be a point that he'll be looking at in game number 4 and possibly 5 as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really map dependent on how comfortable you can get into the late game with mech, like he did on Terraform. That's probably one of the best maps to try and get away with it if you kind of weather the storm, which is maybe why Su went for that all-in to begin with. So, yeah, it's going to come down to the maps, and from there, it's about what Su's going to do, because Su, or Zerg in general, has to stop that from going late game.
There's still a lot of things that Fantasy needs to fix, though. You know, like the way he was attacking and sieging at first when he went for the follow-up attack after losing most of his army against the first few Vipers. He had these tanks very well spread out, and he grouped the next few ones, so the next fight really went in Su's favor, and for a second, it kind of looked like a throw. Eventually, he stayed alive, but he lost another base, and it took him, I guess, what was it, like 15, 20 more minutes to eventually win it, so he cannot be making these mistakes. If the game had been closer, and if he hadn't been so far ahead, this would have been just a throw out of him.
But it's a great confidence boost to finally get that map victory now. And that should push him in the right direction to not make these mistakes, because this series, from what it looked like a train wreck, is now a realistic shot at Fantasy beating Su. He can believe in himself from this point. And I think one of the key points we have to bring up here, Todd, is that mech, it's had a lot of success recently. There's been a lot of discussions about its strength and about its kind of viability from Terran players. And it's, let's bring up the big thing that everyone's been talking about is Life, the world champion of 2014, was eliminated from the GSL most recently because of mech.
Yeah.
Fantasy tried it in game number 2, didn't quite pull it off. Game number 3, he's found success. Surely this is the angle that he's going to take for the rest of the series.
I think it's very likely, yeah. It depends on maps also sometimes a little bit, you know, but he's just doing so well right now, mech in general, and he's finally won a map against the guy that just can't lose, supposedly. So I think if Fantasy here makes the right decision, and I think the right decision is fairly simple, you just mentioned it, is just to go for mech and play solid. It's all in the execution. Map number 2, the execution was weak, he lost. Map number 3 was much better, he won.
All right, thank you very much, guys. We'll get ready for map number 4. It's just around the corner. Before that, we're going to go to a very, very quick commercial break. And when we return, we'll find out if Fantasy can actually take it to the rubber match, or will Su go to his first Intel Extreme Masters final.
All right, welcome back to the Intel Extreme Masters Day 5, the final day over here in Cologne, where we are still in our first semi-final between SKT1's Telecom Su and Dead Pixel's Fantasy. As Fantasy has just done what no other player has done in this run of Su for quite a while, at least not since the qualifiers, and that is take a map off Su. Let's see if we can even up the series.
Gained a little bit of respite there. He's going to have to bring it today, though. He's going to have to step it up, and he's going to need to bring more games like that end game in that last one. Spawning here in the bottom left-hand side of Moonlight Madness, representing Dead Pixels, it is Fantasy.
And spawning on the right side, right top side of this very interesting map, we're looking at the main base of the Zerg, who's still ahead in this series. It is, of course, Su.
Su wants to close this out. He really just wants to go to those finals so badly here.
You think he's shaken up a little bit now as a player, you know, like going on a run and building up a lot of momentum is always great. You know, he won basically 9 maps in a row for already. He's just been winning so much. He's been looking so almost untouchable throughout this entire tournament. And then suddenly you lose a map. Do you think that shakes things up a little bit?
I think he's annoyed. I think Su, when he plays against Mech like that and he goes to late game, I think it just gets on his nerves and he feels really frustrated because he's so good in the late game against Bayer. But when it gets into that situation, we can see he feels a little bit out of his element. I think he's such a strong, steely competitor, though. He's not going to let it shake him up just yet. I think he's going to go into this one and he's going to be really focused on taking those edges as early as possible. He's not going to let it get to that point again. That's his focus now. Don't let it get there.
We are seeing this as we head to the low ground. And that's, of course, interesting because Moonlight Madness is one of these maps where some people are still kind of like, what is your natural, right? Is it on the north side of your base if you're Fantasy right now, or is it over here, tucked away on the low ground, where, of course, you have to worry about not 1, but 2 destructible debris, which makes this a very interesting and a very unique map as well. I've seen a couple of cool TVZs on this map already, where it came down to Mech versus Roach Hydra.
Yep.
And just like Terraform, it can be tricky for a Zerg to find the right angle, but because of that double destructible debris, it gives a lot for Fantasy to worry about. There's a lot of wiggle room for Su to make something happen and create some plays.
Late game, but then you've also got these early attacks that can break in there, and because he's taken that base on the rear, it does leave it very exposed to those. Interestingly enough, Fantasy, he's been a guy who we've seen actually very famous games where he's dropped a tank on the little cliff inside the Zerg's base, used this to both siege the third base on the low ground and elevate Marines into the main base, and he's actually got some beautiful edges in some of his games using that.
Su's taking the right extractor, so just in case, at least that one would survive. I'm personally not a very big fan of it. There were definitely some maps in the past, think back of the good old glory days of Shattered Temple, Lost Temple, however you want to call it. On those maps it was ridiculously strong. On this map I feel it can have an influence, but most of the time Zergs got so good in dealing with that kind of stuff as well. They're so patient with their queens and then getting the Overlord for a little bit of high ground vision, and as long as there's no missile turret and a bunker over there, most of the time I think Zerg is more than fine.
Yeah, we've seen them getting better and better at dealing with it, especially as we do see what has Su been favoring lately. It's 2-base Muta. He loves to rush up to Mutalisks, and once you've got those out, you can really shut that down. Now, another feature of this map, which is very interesting, is actually the 4th base location. Where do the players want to choose to take that? Because it's so exposed, it's so far out front. And often Zerg players sometimes go for the one below the natural, actually opting for that, but it's so far by ground to defend. So once we get to that stage of the game, if it goes there in a sort of standard bio versus Zerg game, it will be really hard for Su to establish and protect that.
So what's your personal preference, Pick?
I actually like the one at the bottom, which, below Su's natural. I feel like if you can get creep to the middle of the map, then you can really defend that quite well. But no matter what, this is a dropping map, and we know Fantasy loves his drops. He loves to send them around the edges of the map.
It's funny, because I kind of prefer the one above, let's say, Fantasy's natural right now, the one a little bit more into the middle. Like, I think it gives you a staging ground towards the middle of the map, makes it easier to push out from, I feel. I feel like in the natural over here, it's very easy to just go for a full wall off, and then you just kind of eliminate that side of the map, right? You throw up some static defenses behind it, and then you kind of just play the map out from only one side.
I think if you do that as the Zerg, you actually want to be taking the back base, though, as your natural, so you can get your creep spread out in that direction a lot faster. So I'm not really sure what Su's aiming for. Interestingly enough, though, it looks like we are going to see that tank drop out of Fantasy here. And he is even adding an armory behind this. So looks like maybe a Hellbat follow-up to this. I'm really unsure about that armory. Maybe just some early mech upgrades. Going to be very interesting to see where he takes this.
I mean, I've seen this build being used in the past as well, and I just think it's a lot stronger if you bring an SCV, so you could potentially throw up a bunker there or maybe a missile turret as well, and that makes it something that it survives forever. Right now, it feels like Su doesn't even want to expand there, by the way, so like there is going to be a tank on that high ground, but what is that tank really going to be able to achieve? Not all that much.
This is exactly what Dark did when he was facing this build, taking that third base down on the other side and completely ignoring this base, saying, guess what, I'm going to ignore your ability to take this cliff. Meanwhile, Fantasy coming in, he's going to set up that tank, and there is a spine crawler already almost finished here. Multiple transfusers saved up. Looks like Su is so well prepared for this build.
Yeah, I mean, Su was almost hoping. It almost seems like Su really wanted Fantasy to go for that build. It's like, please do it, and I will do everything I can so far to make sure that it is not going to kill me. Lately I saw one map where the Spire was actually in range of the tanks, and that made things a little bit dicey, but this time the Spire is not in range, so I think Su is doing a really good job in buying time for himself.
Keep in mind, this is almost an all-in. Funker was showing us Fantasy's production there. He's just pumping out Thors, like more medevacs. Another tank is coming, and this time he is bringing that SCV. Looks like he is going to start setting up missile turrets, maybe bunkers here.
Maybe he's setting himself up. Okay, there we go. I do think this is cool because that means that this is going to be safe for quite a while. Maybe Fantasy's setting himself up for a very, very strong 2 base. From ramp to ramp, this is not the biggest map out there, right? Especially not if you have speed medevacs as well. So maybe he's just going to try to continue this pressure, and something that starts off as an arrest then suddenly turns into an all-in.
This is really cool. It's putting so much pressure on Su right now. Su's Mutalisks are starting. They are going to be able to put on some very strong counter pressure, but they won't be able to engage this position here.
I like the tanks. I've taken out these Schwarzball rocks for now. A couple of these links will get picked off. It's going to be extremely important for Su that he's very patient. Is Fantasy just going to leapfrog forward with tanks over time? Like, is that the game plan over here?
Well, it looks like he's going to engage the spine crawler, but there are multiple transfusers there. That Thor has so much damage. It's blasting through those hit points, but the Queens just keep transfusing it. And this is so much damage going on to Fantasy's army. The spine still lives. Su looking very comfortable there.
That's so good that Su's handling that with so much patience and so much elegance. I was about to say that he does end up losing 2 queens. Those queens were so important in keeping that spine crawler alive. He did everything right before, but now that spine dies, that's so unfortunate for Su. He was doing it so well. Now 3 queens have died and the spine.
Oh, look at this, walking into the base here. He's got a Thor and a couple of Marines there. These medevacs are all very low on hit points. The queens have been dealing out a lot of damage so far, but he can keep putting on pressure.
I think worth mentioning is that Overlord Scout from Su did not see a third command center. He even dropped some creep on the low ground there as well. So he knows that Fantasy is extremely committed to this, and he knows that the most important thing for him right now is just keep calm. Don't make mistakes like he previously made, losing those queens, walking those queens into range of those tanks. As long as he doesn't do that, his macro is slipping a tiny bit as well, perhaps because he had all of those queens defending rather than injecting.
This is so weird. We're seeing Stim on the production tab. Fantasy looks like he wants to go into bio after this, but off 2 base. He's doing the Fantasy build, the mech into bio, but on only 2 bases? I've never seen this before. This is really crazy. It's going to hit a very surprising timing, and it is going to catch a Roach Hydra reaction out of Su. Su thinks this is mech right now. He has no idea there's going to be a bio follow-up. He might be very surprised when he sees a whole lot of Marines backing up the army.
It reminds me a little bit of that final we saw once between 4GG and Live, where 4GG also surprised Live in that final game. Now, this is not the final game yet, but evening up the series like this would be massive. These Mutalisks, however, though, do find one of the Rexes. We'll see Rex number 2 going down as well. Spots the Vikings, spots the Thors, but I think Su, with all the experience that he has at the highest level, should be able to put the pieces together by now.
I think he absolutely does, but does he actually change anything? Because keep in mind, Su knows there's no third base for Fantasy, so even though Roach Hydra isn't the ideal composition against bio, it's actually decent enough if you've got big enough army, if you've got more economy.
Exactly, if you have overwhelming numbers, and he's slightly ahead in the upgrade department as well. I think that's worth mentioning, because despite the fact that he was under a lot of pressure, he started up 1-1, which actually surprised me, and I thought it was questionable at first. But I'm glad I didn't say that, because now it all looks sense. As Fancy has been so slow about this, Su's going to try to finally break this little high ground thingy that we got going on over here. But these missile turrets make it very, very hard for these Mutalisks to pick up that tank.
Su looks so annoyed at this position that Fantasy's taken here. Fantasy is just trying to be as irritating as possible with these units before they get taken out.
I think Fantasy has to be very careful here, though, because now it's just a matter of seconds before Su will finally break this. So don't end up losing those medevacs, don't end up losing those stores, because that's still a very expensive little army. As the tank does get picked off, the medevacs are starting to run low on HP, but they should be able... No, actually, I think this store is super trapped. Yeah, this store is going to die as well, because the Mutalisks will try to pick up this medevac.
Oh, maybe not. And there's so many roaches and hydras have gone down. All the Mutalisks have gone down. Fantasy's happy to sacrifice these units at this point, I think. He's just continuing to annoy Su, disrupt him. Meanwhile, he's building up for this massive 2-base all-in. We have multiple tanks out, 2 tanks, a couple Thors, and a lot of Marauders, Marines, and Hellbats. All with just a couple of upgrades. Just +1 for the bio and just +2 for the mech. Only the attack upgrades, no armor.
An Infestation Pit is going down. As we all know, Fungal Growth could be phenomenal, but most likely that will never come into play over here. Su starts +2 armor as well. This store has 18 kills already and just keeps on going. That last Mutalisk has died, so he was actually not too afraid of picking it up. Man, this store could write a novel by now by the things that he has seen in this game on Moonlight Madness.
There's actually Arnold Schwarzenegger inside that Thor right now. He's just killing everything. And Su, sure, he's getting up high in economy. He's got a pretty good 3-base saturation. But this Thor...
The medevac is so low on HP, 6 HP, and that would mean that this Thor is going to be trapped for a while. The Thor does finally get picked off. But that guy does deserve a round of applause for the 22 kills he collected.
Fantasy's coming in. He's just going to shut down this third immediately. And because of these siege tanks and this choke point, he is going to make it very awkward for Su to engage. But Su realizes this. He's moving around for the flank. His unit's pushing down the left-hand side.
We've seen him get some couple of very beautiful engagements before. Or maybe he's even going to try to force a semi-base trade over here. Su does end up losing one of his bases. There is no tank on the high ground. There's a little bit of bio, but there are no tanks. So what are you going to do right now with your Fantasy? Will you retreat, and will you retreat with everything?
Looks like he is, but his army's actually splitting up. A few of his mech units at the back running into the Roach Hydra. Looks like these Thors and tanks are so valuable and they're all going down. Su can afford that trade, but Fantasy cannot. Those are his most valuable units.
Medevacs will come here to save the day and will save 1 Thor and 1 tank. A lot of drones have gone down though, over 20 drones. So overall, I think this was still more than acceptable for Fantasy. He has a third command center that's on the way now as well. There's almost no rush for him to take it. Those Vikings could potentially find all these overlords. That would be a happy Viking party.
This is actually a really awkward position for Su. As you said, every last one of those drones did end up getting taken down. So he's got a huge Roach Hydra force, but he doesn't have a big economy behind it.
I don't think he should ever run into here. There's a bunch of SUVs repairing the Thor as well. Tank sieged up. Bio was ready to receive that army. During all this, Su's going up to Hive now, and I find that surprising to say the least, because he's not really all that rich anymore. He did sort of re-establish his third base into his original natural, so to speak.
Look at Su's army here. It looks like he's just gnashing his teeth with frustration. He's been so close to just getting through the series with a 3-0, and now he's in a really hard position. Looks like Fantasy may be able to even this up. Su needs to find an opening, but this is a very good defensive position for these tanks.
Well, I mean, this is not Fantasy's entire army. I actually think that if Su would have shoved there with all those Roaches and Hydras, there's a good chance he would have been able to power through, because I felt like a lot of the units from Fantasy were out of position, and without any bio support there, I think those armies, those units look quite weak. But of course, Su doesn't have the vision that we have. He doesn't know how far away those units really are.
Oh my
And if he commits and all the bio stimps forward, he's going to end up losing everything.
Look at this double drop on the north side. He's got a 6 Viking support. Looks like he wants to dart in on the economy, but the army for Su is in position to stop that. Just cleaning up some map vision, and Fantasy's getting out there. He's applying pressure, and his third base is now established.
A couple of these buy units did get picked off over here before Fantasy was forced to pick up the remaining units and retreat for now. I mean, Su is going to be able to get a couple of Vipers out. That is something that he can definitely work with. He could potentially start +3 missile attacks as well, but +3 is about to finish up for this half mech, half bio army that Fantasy is working with.
Oh, Su setting up a huge flank right now. His Vipers aren't out yet, though. He needs Blinding Clouds to make this work, I think. Oh, but with such a sandwich, he might be able to just jump on top of it. The tanks aren't sieged. The upgrades are superior for Su, and these roaches charging in the back are going to kill these tanks so quickly. The Marauders are crushing through the Hydras and roaches on the front, but now with the tanks gone from the back, this army of Fantasies is looking a little bit exposed.
Yep, and during all this, he kept those buy units on the north side of the map. He was moving in, waiting until the fight started, and he's going to be able to pick up that hatchery, maybe even pick up the hive over here as well, as Su's going to try to get all of the units that he currently has together, but it just seems like Fantasy is winning on both angles.
Sick Blinding Cloud, though, does disrupt a lot of that units. Fantasy actually micros back into it, tries to boost out of there, and look at that, no Hydras on the rear side, and he actually gets most of his army out while killing the third base of Su. Su's economy is in tatters. He is mining from about half a base right now, and Fantasy still has a 3-base economy, still has a good number of units. Fantasy is in the driver's seat right now. He is looking to equalize this series. He wants to bring it back, and he wants to say, no, Su, I am going to make it to this finals.
It's been a really remarkable game so far by Fantasy, just from start to finish, setting things up slowly, but he just started getting better and better trades, and now in the end here, having that big push into the natural, while having those buy units on the north side. Su's going to try to counterattack, does drop a pretty good Blinding Cloud, but this army of Fantasy is just so much stronger, and GG is called. Fantasy down 0-2 brings it back as we are going to game number 5, the rubber match of the first semifinals over here at the final day of the Intel Extreme Masters. This was a really sick game. If you have a Terran Heart pick, it's beating a little faster, because that was really cool. Fantasy played a very unusual, unorthodox style, but it all made sense, and it just felt like it all came together so beautifully.
It was such a beautiful play, and Su, he looked like he was handling it so well, and then just a little bit of misattention, some queens being sniped down, things started to fray, and it was such a surprising follow-up from Fantasy. It wasn't just a single tank and a few Marines. Suddenly there was a Thor in his base. Suddenly there was no third base going down. What the hell is happening? And Su just wasn't able to put everything together, wasn't able to get the pieces in position to deal with it.
I mean, the counterattack was a crucial moment, of course, on that game of Moonlight Madness, and especially when Fantasy kind of split up his units, and it almost looked like he was going to end up losing 2 Thors and 3 tanks for pretty much nothing. But then he just got in there in the nick of time, was able to pick up 2 of these units, and then suddenly, you know, during all that, he picked up that base on the right side, and he somehow held the ramp. I felt that Su was perhaps a little bit indecisive. It is, of course, really hard to, you know, let's say, how much was that? Maybe 100 supply of Roach Hydra funnel up through that tiny little ramp that goes into the main base. Like, that's a very awkward call and a very awkward decision to make in general.
Exactly. I mean, it's so risky, right? You know Fantasy's pulling back across the map, and this is your army. You've just lost a key piece of your economy. If you get kind of cornered inside the Terran base, maybe you wreck their production, but if he can corner your army and deal with it cost efficiently, like, you've got nowhere else to go. And Fantasy just showed such a calm, cool build there, and I love the specialty there. I think going into this next map, Fantasy, he's just in deep thought thinking, I need to do something like that again. I need to do one of these unique, aggressive plays where I can have the tempo on my side. I need to throw this guy off. Su's still a monster. Yeah, I'm 2-2 with him, but I've got to do something special.
I mean, it was really cool. This is one of these builds that only works on that specific map. There's no other map that Fantasy could ever pull that one off. We've seen a couple of wild maps so far in this best of 5, but we're going to close things out on the map that pretty much every StarCraft 2 player right now is most comfortable on. Coda was one of the most popular maps of the previous map season, has survived the cut, it's back again, and I feel this right now that almost on any given moment, whenever pro gamers are playing, you just don't veto Coda, you know. Coda is the new, let's say,
Overgrowth, it's the Daybreak.
Yes.
It's the Zelnaga Caverns if we go back far enough.
Exactly. It's just a map that you don't veto. Every race is pretty damn okay with it. This is a map that's very straightforward. It's very fair in general, and most of the time you're looking at basic StarCraft where it just all comes down to execution, and the best player is going to win.
And that's what Su wants right now. He's been up 2-0. He's been inches away from clinching it, and then suddenly to end up on 2-2, he can feel it slipping away from him. And I know you've been there back in the day in Warcraft 3 in tournaments. I've been there myself, where you feel like, I've got this in the bag. You're already thinking about the next game, the finals, or the next round, and suddenly you start to realize things are slipping away.
I didn't really have a whole lot of series in the bag pick. I would love to brag, but my Warcraft 3 career is nothing to brag about.
Maybe in your next show match versus Todd, we can experience some of that.
Hopefully. Well, we'll see. Need to practice a little for that one. Otherwise, he's never going to let it go. You know how he is.
Oh, I do know. Of course, look at that Kespa Cup badge there. Su's wearing that with pride. Remember, it wasn't long ago he won his first championship. He had a great 2014 where he came second place in like 3 GSLs in a row. I think a Star League as well. It was 4 GSLs in a row. Just amazing performances. He was showing that he was one of the best players in the world, maybe arguably the best just through consistency, but he wasn't able to clinch it out. And just recently, he's kind of discovered that champion within himself.
Yep. Won a big online tournament as well, one of the most stacked online tournaments we've ever had. And now he wants to try his luck overseas. Came to Germany, wants to win his first tournament outside of Korea. It's absolutely no question whether or not Su is good enough for it, but Fantasy has definitely built up a lot of momentum as we are hopping into Coda for the final game of this best of 5.
And spawning here on the right-hand side, the challenging player looking to make a name for himself. It is Dead Pixels Fantasy.
Gave us a super entertaining series so far. On the left top side of Coda, the man who looked untouchable but now got a couple scratches, it is Su. But he could still make it over the finish line. As long as that engine keeps running, Pig.
Oh yeah. You know, I call Fantasy the challenger, but really, that's only his identity in StarCraft 2. If we go back long enough, Fantasy was one of the best Brood War players. Right towards the end of StarCraft 1, he was making it to championships. He did win an OSL title. Just such a consistent player, and he hasn't had those performances in StarCraft 2 just yet. But this year is kind of seen his performances pick up. We've seen him getting more consistent. He's been making deeper runs, and if he could make it past Su here to the finals, it really would be his career performance to date.
I mean, he left a Korean team to join a foreign team, and of course, then, you know, we will see him more, and he is going to have some tournament runs, because the more you travel, you know, the more opportunities you will have. But so far, it hasn't really come all together yet. You could say it's been the most successful year for Fantasy, but I don't even think that he considers it the most successful year, because, you know, not winning a GSL or not winning a Kespa Cup, that's forgivable, and you often only have 2 chances. But if you can play in 6, 7, 8, 9 foreign tournaments in a year, a player like Fantasy, he expects himself to win one. And winning the Intel Extreme Masters here, that would be by far and away his biggest achievement out of his StarCraft 2 career. And especially, you know, if it would be against players like Su in the semifinals, and then either MMA or Innovation in the final, like, that would just be sick. That's something you could be extremely proud of, and that's definitely the standard that a player like Fantasy holds himself to, though.
Absolutely. Su here going for that pool first opening once again, looking like he wants to give no chance for Fantasy to take any edges with early aggression, early sneaky barracks plays, Reaper rushes, anything like that. Su playing solid as a rock, and I think Fantasy has a great read on how Su's playing. We've seen him open up with so many command center first builds this game, saying, I'm going to take a really nice economy start because I know you're not going to do anything to me. You feel like you're maybe the stronger player, you feel like you're the favorite, you're not going to take any risks, so I can just be nice and strong with my economic openings.
Yep, and, you know, of course as well, always in game number 5, whenever you were down 0-2 and it almost feels like, you know, here we go again, and then suddenly you're back into this series, then in the final game you often play with a little bit of like, I've got nothing to lose and everything to win attitude. Well, obviously for Su it's a little bit more shaky going into this game, because nobody wants to be that guy that was up 2-0 and will end up losing the series 2-3.
It's actually a shattering experience for that to happen. And for Fantasy, he has gone for this build on code. Ooh, Zergling's coming in just before the bunker finishes, almost getting a sneaky kill on him. That would have been really annoying for Fantasy, because they then could have stopped the second Marine getting into the bunker. But Fantasy does hold on strong for the moment, looking like he wants to go into that factory. And this time around, we don't see any super crazy fast second gas from Fantasy. Looking like he's probably going to be opting for that 3 command center, and I'd love to see that, because these guys, if they both open up with like really macro-focused late-game builds, I want to see this big pushes, creep spread being cleared, massive armies clashing. I think we've got a good chance of seeing this in the final elimination game.
Do you really think that Fantasy is just going to play straight up bio though, just defensive and try to get out as many Marines and Marauders as possible? Like on a map like Coda, where I feel that Su in general is so strong already. There we do see another command center going down. I'm not sure if that's in range of that overload.
No, it is just outside.
He's very close to it though, so if he moves it a little bit, he could potentially see it. Fantasy is going to start out his starport as well. I think so far everything is very standard, but I kind of feel that if you look at Iron Fortress, things were going okay at first for Fantasy. Yep. It just seems like it's very difficult to play against Su, super straight up with just bio.
Maybe super straight up into mech then will be the choice. And I mean, we've looked at the past few wins, even the last game, a bio-mech mix. Yeah. Looks like Fantasy's getting success with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just go with what's strong. I got to agree with you there, Roddy. That would be a good choice. The Overlord's coming in. Su wants to get this scouting information. He wants to verify what's happening. Sees two barracks, realizes, no, one of them is just the factory. It's moved over.
Oh, you saw that as well. Fantasy lifting up the starport for a split second, and then he was going to move it again. He just didn't want to reveal it just
And he actually started concussive shells on the tech lab to make it look like he was upgrading Stim.
Oh, that's so good.
Su seeing that is going to think, oh, cool, you're just going into bio, probably after a third command center. And that is really tricking him. He's not going to be ready for the starport transition. Interestingly, they're not going for a Banshee straight away. Maybe waiting for the gas to build up a little bit more to get that cloak going.
Okay, I see. Man, so many mind games. Maybe at a certain point he's even scaring himself a little bit as the Spire is going down, or maybe he just feels like it's not worth it because Su will have Mutalisk most of the time out pretty quickly. These Hellions are just going to ignore the Queens for now. There are not a whole lot of Zerglings, but just enough to scare them off. Actually, I really think for Fantasy, he probably should have just sacrificed them because he's going to end up losing two of them anyway. I guess having two Hellions is still better than zero, but...
If you got all four of those out of there, I would have really loved that decision. But yeah, the Zerglings around, Su actually adjusted a few of those Lings, wrapped around it, stopped them pulling out. And we do see on that production tab, oh, he actually spotted the Spire timing as well. Great pickup there from our observer, Funker. But back at home, Fantasy has his mind set. As you said, Roddy, he's going to go for mech in this game.
Yep, I'm not too surprised just by looking at it. You know, at a certain moment you just have to pick the right battles, right? You look at Iron Fortress, you look at Terraform, which I guess wasn't even really a game to at that point, and then you look at how well Fantasy did, and in particular with a couple of the questionable engagements, Su took super late game. So Fantasy is probably telling himself right now, if I make it to a 4-base scenario, if I can get 3-3 mech, if I can eventually get a little bit of Sky Terran in my army as well, I think I'm going to be okay. I think I can actually win this game. So it's all up to him right now to just make it to that stage in the game.
And this time we see some much more solid turret placement from him. And they're also going down very early. You can see exactly what you were saying there, Roddy. Fantasy's looking at this mindset of I want to defend, I want to get up my economy, I want to build up my army because I've seen Su's not comfortable there. He's making some poor engagements. And for the moment, I think this is a great setup for Fantasy. For Su, does he realize this is happening just yet?
We'll see. He's going to see it soon now. He's going to start plus missile attacks already and carapace. Roach Warren is on the way as well. So it seems a little bit similar to what was happening on Terraform, where he picked up on it very quickly. But this time these Mutalisks shouldn't really be able to do a whole lot. Opposite of Terraform, of course, where they did a lot of damage immediately. But there are Vikings here to usher them away. The first Stores are about to make their appearance into the battlefield. I like this for Fantasy. I actually like it quite a bit because he's getting everything the way that he wants it so far.
And a very fast infestation pit is going down this game for Su. Su looking like he doesn't want to opt for any big roach push on lair tech. He wants to rush to Hive, get out Vipers as quickly as possible. And we did see a few moments right when he first had his Viper tech in that Terraform game, he had staggeringly good engagements. Like, just, it's so hard to even describe how good that 360 surround was. He'd always find the hole in the Vikings' vision as well, come from behind with those Vipers so they wouldn't get sniped down, and he'd almost always land the perfect blinding clouds.
Yeah, that was true Zerg art right there, one of those engagements on Terraform. But, you know, Fantasy will learn from that as well. It's one of these things where you just learn every single game, and Fantasy won't make the same mistake twice. This time he'll probably spread out his Vikings a little more, make sure he will cover all areas, and even spread out his tanks a little bit more, so a single blinding cloud won't get 4 tanks anymore, but perhaps 2 tanks at best.
Ooh, triple upgrades going for Su there. Melee upgrades as well, looking like he wants to prepare for that Ultralisk swap later on. Meanwhile, Fantasy just progressing, adding more and more factories, getting up that infrastructure, and his Hellions are looking to poke around the sides of the map, seeing if they can find some drones that are exposed.
I'm a little bit worried, man. We've seen some of the best Zerg players in the world already struggle with mech a couple of times, of course, alive in the Korean leagues, and Su is up there. Su, if not perhaps even a little bit better than live right now, also didn't look flawless in some of the decision making, and I know it's extremely difficult to go up against such a scary army, especially ever since, you know, the Swarmos is not the Swarmos that it used to be. It's a little different now.
Wow, we've already seen a much better preparation from Su this game. Just look at this Hellion defense. He's actually so well prepared with his unit split up, and we already see Queens being added into the mix. This time, he seems to really be focused on actually the Ultralisk stage. I was talking about Viper, Roach, Hydra, but it looks like we're going to see Ultralisks, Queens, Roaches, Hydras, and Vipers. Su opting to go to the end game.
But there is an answer to that if you're a Fantasy there. There's an absolute answer, and I really love the wall of supply depots already. That's just such a good start at first. We all know that Ultralisk can be a little derpy as well. They're very big units, and if you attack move, they will just start attack moving supply depots, while there are a bunch of tanks and Taurs shooting at them from behind that wall. More command centers going down. Those mech upgrades are well on their way. You know, Fantasy's probably just trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, he would love to do some damage with these Hellions, but the most important thing is just that he buys time and that eventually he gets the army that he wants to get. And right now, he's at the 150 supply, and he's slowly but steady. He's getting there.
Both players are so nervous about taking too many big risks this game. They don't want to throw away their tournament life right now. Both players are one game away from making it to the finals. This is the deciding match, and we can see those Vikings have cleared up the right-hand side. Hellions once again darting in the left. But look at this. Su's learnt from his mistakes. He's already got spine crawlers up. His units are well positioned. Only going to lose a couple of drones here.
He's definitely handling that so much better than Terraform. But at the end of the day, I don't feel the Hellions is where it went wrong on Terraform. It was mostly, you know, the one or two super big fights. As soon as Fantasy got the army he was looking for, Fantasy moving out there a little bit, and Su probably looked at it. He's like, yes, please, you know, let's fight right now. Let's fight when you're at 150 supply. I would like that. Let's just never fight again against 174 army supply. As right now it's only 87. Creep spread, of course, is excellent, like Moonglade mentioned before. You know, if you're one of the best Zergs in the world, then needless to say, your creep spread is also going to be very good, because it's going to be hard to play Zerg on that level without having that.
He wants to see what's going on. Fantasy just dropping scans all over the place. Already 2 extra orbital command centers are going down. Fantasy pushing into the middle of the map.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. He threw down a lot of scans and he missed most of the Ultralisks. So perhaps he felt, hey, if I force a fight right now, it might be okay. But no, absolutely not. Even when Kindness Plating is not ready yet,
he needs to spread out.
Yeah, he needs to spread out further. 1 or 2 Blinding Clouds could be devastating right now.
Oh my god, Blinding Clouds all over half of that mecha army. These Ultras are crashing in. They've got so much transfuse. This is such a great attack for Su, clearing out so much of this mech army. Oh, Fantasy caught completely out of position. The SCV's frantically trying to repair this planetary fortress, but everything is going down. Su sensed weakness and he is capitalizing on it right now. He wants to go to the finals of IEM.
Not a whole lot left for Fantasy. No more Taurs, no more tanks. Forced to land the Vikings, and the planetary fortress dies as well. So even if Su backs up over here, he did great economic damage. He absolutely got the fight that he was dreaming of over there. And Fantasy is absolutely going to A, regret moving out, and B, not spreading out his tanks and Taurs a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit slow on his Viking focus fire. Once again as well, this army is crashing through this depot wall. There is just so few units here. Su knows he can push in there. He is maxed out against 100 supply Fantasy. These Thors trying to mount a heroic defense on the ramp, but the Ultralisks just aren't dying.
Nope, they're still alive. There are more Queens as well. They are gathering some energy. They will be able to land some transfuses again. And Su, the player who made it to the semifinals without dropping a map, was up 2-0. Almost looked like it was slipping away from him, but he is going to set things straight over here in the final game on Coda, as he is marching into the natural Fantasy, being up 120 supply.
Oh, this is a devastating attack. Su here has said, no, I am not going to let you steal this away from me. He was looking worried before in that booth, but he has pulled it together. He has said, I will just go straight towards the Ultralisk, straight towards the Queens, and I will crash through your mech force.
We'll make it into the final of his first foreign tournament after making it to 4 GSL finals, a Kespa Cup final, a DreamHack Cup final. This time, well, DreamHack was foreign then, I guess, as well. But this time, Su is going to be able to do it at an Intel Extreme Masters event for the first time in Germany, as he is just picking apart Fantasy now. He did lose a lot of Ultras on that ramp, has to be careful. We've seen a couple throws here and there as well, but normally a player like Su should never be able to lose this anymore.
Oh, Su's having a bit of fun now, kind of trailing in here. He's just done devastating damage, and Su's got to be feeling a little bit relaxed in his mind now, saying, I've just ripped apart the mech army, and that mech army is not easy to replace. Those units increment out so incredibly slowly. Meanwhile, if you look at that production tab of Zerg, there are so many Ultralisks popping out. There is such a huge economy. 89, 90 drones for Su. He can afford to make so many more units here.
Yeah, he can pretty much make whatever he wants. Of course, losing all those queens, that does hurt a little bit because he can't really produce that many at the same time, even though he has 5 hatcheries, so he can start with it, but he knows how much economic damage he did, and Fantasy knows that he's in an absolute world of trouble. He's going to try to send a couple of Hellions to the right top side of this map, get a couple drone kills here and there. Nobody wants to tap out in Game 5 of the semi-finals of a StarCraft 2 tournament. You always want to fight till the bitter end, especially when your name is Fantasy and you're well known for your GG timings.
Oh, Fantasy does not give up easily. You really need to shove him out of the game before he even considers typing GG. Fantasy here is trying to slowly rebuild. His Hellions are trying to distract, trying to buy time, and he's setting up that wall out front of his third base, trying to hang on.
Look at the upgrade tab as well. This pretty much tells everything. Su just having so many upgrades, so many different upgrades, and Fantasy just sitting on those poor 3 upgrades, you know, Infernal Pre-Igniter and 2 mech upgrades. It really does tell you what kind of a player Su is as well, you know, just making it so hard to always be ready for whatever he wants to do because he's giving himself multiple options.
Hellions come in, picking up a couple drone kills, buying a little bit more time. Su is taking his time here.
Yeah,
on Terraform.
Be careful, Su, because on Terraform that absolutely backfired. You gave him a little bit too much time. Well, you could have just absolutely... I think he could have crushed him in a certain point when he was doubling the army supply. This time, though, Su, as soon as he's maxed out, I think he's just going to go for it again. And even if he just trades out all these ultras, if he kills all the tanks, you know, this is 22 minutes into the game. Main base is pretty much run dry. Natural is going to run dry as well in the upcoming minutes. So if he just resets the unit count of Fantasy, that would already be good enough. Just don't give him that fourth base. Whatever you do, Su, don't give him that fourth base.
Fantasy wrapping some tanks around the cliff and the ledge here, using that very well, but he has no Sim City here. He needs to bring up like some barracks or some depots or something to choke up this position. Otherwise, the Ultralisks are just going to get on top of these tanks too easily. He's still getting time, though. Yeah. What is Su doing?
I don't know.
I'm really just wandering around the map.
I think he's setting up the engagement, and I really hope that he is, because the longer he waits, the scarier he's going to go get. He's actually going to go back for a couple of these Hellions. This is what Fantasy wants you to do, Su.
I don't understand what's going through Su's mind right now. Feeling the nerves here as he's about to go to the finals. He needs to attack, and he needs to do it right now. Every second that goes by, this mech army grows stronger. It grows more cost efficient.
Yeah, we're suddenly looking at 13 tanks. There are overseas in the mix as well. There's plenty of queens, so they could potentially deal with the Banshees. We saw the Banshees doing quite a bit of eco damage in the later stages of Terraform. The barracks get picked up once again. There are ultras everywhere. These queens having a very favorable engagement against these Banshees as they pick off 2 Banshees in no time.
A little bit sloppy there from Fantasy, but Fantasy's fire is getting high. Look at the setup for Su. Ultra's coming in from both sides here. Ultra's on the south trying to crash through. Ultra's on the top as well. The Ultra's at the top are getting shot down very quickly down here at the bottom, but he just has an overwhelming force. So many queens in the back are starting to spam down that transfuse, and this mech army is getting ripped to shreds.
Yeah, it wasn't synced perfectly, but I still think it's going to be good enough, even though it's right before +3 attack, but there are just so many ultras. There were quite a few queens as well, dropping a couple of transfuses here and there, and just when Fantasy almost had an army to work with again, he has to start pretty much from where he was a couple of minutes ago, below 100 supply, while Su, well, he's on 140 supply, but he has a massive bank, 7,000 minerals, 5,000 gas, as he's killing the last remaining SCVs, making it harder and harder for Fantasy to pretty much build anything.
I think it's going to be Mutalisk time here to finish it off. Su is just crashing through, crushing the economy with these Ultras and Queens. And there we go in the production tab. 43 Mutalisks on the way for Su. He's going to finish this in style. Fantasy's coming down with this ragtag group of units. He wants to try and hang on. Little does he know that Su is going to rip away his chance to get to the finals right here, right now.
Life's good when you're rich. 43 Mutalisks and still plenty of money left. And then you look at Fantasy's economy and it's like going up so slowly, and then he builds one SCV and then it was at 0. On a certain point, his bank was absolutely at 0. A scan is going to go down. He's going to see the mutas, and Su flies all of them into the scan radius. He's like, here you go. You really want to know? This is how many I got. As GG is called, and Su had to work very hard for it, but he will do it, and he will advance to the finals of the Intel Extreme Masters.
A near upset there for Su. You can see the relief on his face as he does close that out. A very nice win for him. It looked so good at the start, such a commanding 2-0, and then suddenly Fantasy came back and really gave him a run for his money. But Su now, he's had his eyes set on the finals, and he is going to be going there.
Where he will face another Terran, as of course the second semifinals will be coming up after a little bit of analysis, a little bit of chitty chat with the man who just advanced, but he will face the winner of MMA versus Innovation, which is going to be our second semifinal, and that's going to be one hell of a series as well. Innovation has built up a little bit of a reputation when it comes to playing epic TVTs in Cologne, as perhaps the best TVT that I've ever seen. He played here, not too far away.
He's pretty scary. Like his just calm skill with it is fantastic. You can see Fantasy there, a little bit of a crushing defeat. Does look a little bit disappointed with that.
Well, we love this series pick. I know you do. I saw you smiling throughout the entire series, and I can't wait to see what the boys at the analysis desk have to say about it.
Thank you very much, Rotterdam. Su finds himself in his 7th StarCraft 2 tournament now over the years. Will he get his second championship, though? That's to be found out a little bit later on. But an excellent performance from Su. It almost slipped away from him, Todd, though. Fantasy almost pulled the turnaround.
Yeah, he had 2 great games that he won, 2 maps in a row. And from there, it really looked like he had gained some momentum. And I was really worried for Su here for a second.
Yeah.
But in the last map, I guess he stayed calm, collected, and he really made some very good adjustments against what Fantasy was doing in the few previous maps that had worked out so well for him. So I really liked the way he went about finally fixing what he was doing wrong and waited until the most important moment and that final map to get the victory.
Nailed it, man. He nailed it at the end. We'll talk a little bit about this series a little bit more in a second, but we do have Su on stage waiting with Chobra.
Thank you, Apollo, and all you lovely gentlemen back there casting the games for us. But of course, we have our first finalist here at the Intel Extreme Masters Gamescom. It is going to be Su from SK Telecom T1. Oh, you saw that. He's pretty happy about it. But before we move forward with the joy of it, of course, the clean streak has now been ruined by Fantasy. Wondering what he thinks about that.
일단 결승 이제 진출은 축하드리는데 지금까지 맵을 하나도 안 지시다가 이번 준결승에 와서 이제 2번을 지셨잖아요. 그거에 대해서 조금 그냥 속상하거나 실망스러운 부분이 있으세요?
예전에 전승으로 결승에 갔다가 이제 결승에서 진 적이 있거든요. 그 기억이 좀 떠오를까 봐 걱정 많이 됐는데 2판 진 게 오히려 더 잘 된 것 같아요.
Yeah, so actually in the past, I had a chance to go undefeated, and I went to the finals, and that's where I just got crushed. So I started getting flashbacks. So in some ways, I'm actually happy it happened here in the semifinals. I can put it behind me and go on to the finals. Now let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, coming in, you're the one Zerg left, and of course, now going forward, you're gonna have to face another Terran. Are you worried at all, or in some ways, are you glad that you're getting this practice going forward again?
그러면 이번에도 이제 뭐 준결승에서도 테란전을 하셨는데 결승에서도 무조건 이제 테란전을 하실 거잖아요. 준결승에서도 뭐 연습을 할 수 있고 그래서 오히려 어떻게 보면 자신감이 좀 더 있으신가요?
사실 메카닉에 대한 연습이 좀 안 돼 있는데 4강을 통해서 좀 연습이 된 것 같아서 좋은 것 같아요.
Yeah, I actually worried a little bit about my game against mech builds, but I think I got plenty of practice for that in the semifinals, so I'm happy again going into the finals. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have to find out how close is he? Is he gonna get another win here to continue from the Kespa Cup in Korea?
그러면 이제 한국에서는 캐스퍼컵 우승하셨잖아요. 근데 지금까지 근데 그 전까지는 계속 물론 좋은 성적이지만 2등을 하셨는데 이번에 2번 연속으로 우승할 수 있다는 자신감 있으세요?
원래 우승 처음이 힘든 건데 한번 해보니까 좀 쉬운 것 같더라고요. 그래서 이번에도 우승 쉽게 할 수 있을 것 같아요.
Yeah, you know, originally it's a little bit hard, but now that I've gotten through it once, now that I've won a tournament once, it's not as hard as I thought. So this time I think I'm going to be able to go forward and take that trophy again. Ladies and gentlemen, again, your first finalist for the Intel Extreme Masters at Gamescom. Give him another big round of applause, Sue from SK Telecom T1. And now let's hear more about what the boys think about that match.
Thank you very much, Chobra. Great to have you back here on the last day of the Intel Extreme Masters in Gamescom. Moonglaze, welcome to the desk officially now.
It's good to be
for the
here.
post-game discussion.
Yeah, I can't wait to say stuff.
Looking at that series, though, it really felt to me watching it, and, you know, back me up, call me a noob, however you want to do it.
I'd never do that
just
to
the
you.
lonely host over here.
Okay.
It felt like Sue started that series, great momentum, 2-0 up, then got surprised kind of with this kind of switch of style, but then towards the end really started to make the correct adjustments, and in Game 5 he knew exactly what to do.
Yeah, I think the map had a lot to play with it as well, and his timing with his attacks, not taking the damage early on with the Hellion run-bys like he did in the previous games. He certainly got a taste for it in Game 2, I believe. He saw like the start of Fantasy trying to switch things up on Bridgehead. Yeah. He shut that down quick, smart, but some of these maps is a little bit harder to try and punish a mech sort of style in the early game. So he started to adapt from there. He kind of got pressed pretty hard, and even in Game 5, you know, like, it was a dangerous time. Like, he had to stop the mech before it got to like 4 or 5 bases comfortably.
I talked about this actually a little bit pre-game because I feel like it's very important, you know, that damage. And I think a lot of people kind of overlook that. They're like, well, like, early game damage is going to be important. Like, to win StarCraft games, you need to kill the opponent's units. Yeah. Yes, but it actually comes down a lot to how many units you can kill here as a 10. Because if you don't weaken the Zerg player's economy at all, you find yourself in a lot of trouble. And in the games that Fantasy did damage in, he did very well. In those that he didn't do any damage, he was in trouble. So in the end, it really comes down to that. And both players, they showed good things, but in the end, it was just Sue who did better, especially in that last map.
Definitely a lot of information, strengths and weaknesses that both Innovation or MMA would have picked on upon watching this series. Obviously, that's one of the weaknesses. There's a strength of being able to play 2 matchups in a row. You get the ball rolling for it, your mindset's correct, but your opponents are going to be watching this. With the weaknesses that Sue is going to be carrying through that could be picked upon?
I think the late game for Zerg in general is the weakness when it comes to mech.
Yeah.
And for instance, if we have Innovation making it to the Grand Finals, which some might suspect will happen, we're going to see a much different kind of mech play, a much more focused on the battle cruisers, which actually won Fantasy one of his games. It kind of gets to a point where the army is like too strong for the Zerg really to have a proper answer to, unless their bank is infinite essentially. So in the end of all things, I think Sue he plays the right sort of game, but he's just got to be careful of the games that he let by to Fantasy with those Hellion run-bys and whatnot. But he's got to end it before it gets any further than when it did.
So the big question now then is Sue going to fail in the finals? Is he going to mess up again as he's done in the past? Or as he said, I mean, the last final he did play in was a victory. So the second final now, surely another one.
He seemed really confident earlier, you know, when he said that he wasn't really afraid of anybody and he was his tournament. I mean, he was going to win it. So I'm not sure if that's a bluff, you know, like he just wants to appear really confident, or he actually thinks that he's going to demolish Innovation if he plays him, or MMA in this case, because like you never know. And even if you ask him, you know, he might not necessarily tell you like what the truth is, or even realize himself what it is. So it's hard to say. I guess the only way we can figure it out is wait and see what happens in the finals.
I mean, one quick thing here before we go to the break to set up for the next match is, in the show interview I did with Sue, he was very polite and was very honest. He was like, you know, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say that I am going to win the tournament, because if I do that, then if I lose, then I'm going to feel really bad about it. And he was kind of take that approach to it. When I did the YouTube interview, which I'm not too sure you guys did, which is on the Intel Extreme Masters YouTube channel, and the ESL YouTube channel, sorry, is that he was completely opposite. I was like, come on, man, it's just me and you. You tell me the truth. You tell me the truth, man. You're going to win this. He's like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He was really confident. And when he was off camera and kind of not on stream in front of all his fans, even though the video was going to be on stream in front of the fans anyway, he was completely confident. He said this is nothing but a first place for him.
Wow, that's impressive confidence. And I guess as a player, you have to feel confident going into a tournament. Otherwise, it's kind of like a weird mindset you'd always have. I don't know. He got pressed in that semifinals, and I think there's going to be harder players to come. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that ends up.
That's right. So Sue has made it to the grand finals here at the Intel Extreme Masters, and more importantly, not more importantly, but also has qualified for the World Championship of the Intel Extreme Masters. His next opponent is going to be Acer MMA or Innovation. Which one will it be? Make sure to check out plays.tv for all the action that you've missed over the last couple of days. Maybe some highlights of your favorite players. Go find them over there. Also, there's some first-person VODs, which I know all StarCraft fans love to watch. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. When we return, though, we are going to find the Terran player that will play in the grand finals against Sue.